Chapter 17 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 17 Stick. Patience is the courage of the conqueror. It is the virtue par excellence of man against destiny, of the one against the world, and of the soul against matter. Therefore, this is the courage of the gospel, and its importance, in a social view, its importance to races and institutions, cannot be too earnestly inculcated. Bulwer. Perpetual pushing and assurance put a difficulty out of countenance, and make a seeming impossibility give way. Jeremy Collier. To bear is to conquer fate. Campbell. The nerve that never relaxes, the eye that never blenches, the thought that never wanders, these are the masters of victory. Burke. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Longfellow. How long did it take you to learn to play? Asked a young man of Gerardini. 12 hours a day for 20 years, replied the great violinist. Layman Beecher's father, when asked how long it took him to write his celebrated sermon on the government of God, replied, about 40 years. If you will study a year, I will teach you to sing well, said an Italian music teacher to a pupil who wished to know what can be hoped for with study. If 2 years, you may excel. If you will practice the scale constantly for 3 years, I will make you the best tenor in Italy. If for 4 years, you may have the world at your feet. Perceiving that Caffarelli had a fine tenor voice and unusual talent, a teacher offered to give him a thorough musical education free of charge, provided the pupil would promise never to complain of the course of instruction given. The first year the master gave nothing but the scales, compelling the youth to practice them over and over again. The second year it was the same, the third, and the fourth, the conditions of the bargain being the only reply to any question in relation to a change from such monotonous drill. The fifth year the teacher introduced chromatics and thorough bass, and at its close, when Caffarelli looked for something more brilliant and interesting, the master said, "Go, my son, I can teach you nothing more. You are the first singer of Italy and of the world." The mastery of scales and diatonics gave him power to sing anything. "Keep at the helm," said President Porter. "Steer your own ship, and remember that the great art of commanding is to take a fair share of the work. Strike out, assume your own position. Put potatoes in a cart over a rough road, and the small ones go to the bottom." "Never depend upon your genius," said John Ruskin in the words of Joshua Reynolds. "If you have talent, industry will improve it. If you have none, industry will supply the deficiency." "The only merit to which I lay claim," said Hugh Miller, "is that of patient research. A merit in which whoever wills may rival or surpass me. And this humble faculty of patience, when rightly developed, may lead to more extraordinary development of ideas than even genius itself." Titian, the greatest master of color the world has seen, used to say, White, red, and black, these are all the colors that a painter needs, but he must know how to use them. It took 50 years of constant hard practice to bring him to his full mastery. "How much grows everywhere if we do but wait!" exclaims Carlyle. "Not a difficulty but can transfigure itself into a triumph. Not even a deformity but if our own soul have imprinted worth on it will grow dear to us." Persistency is characteristic of all men who have accomplished anything great. They may lack in some other particular, have many weaknesses or eccentricities, but the quality of persistence is never absent in a successful man. No matter what opposition he meets, or what discouragements overtake him, he is always persistent. Drudgery cannot disgust him, obstacles cannot discourage him, labor cannot weary him. He will persist, no matter what comes or what goes. It is a part of his nature. He could almost as easily stop breathing. It is not so much brilliancy of intellect or fertility of resource as persistency of effort, constancy of purpose, that makes a great man. Persistency always gives confidence. Everybody believes in the man who persists. He may meet misfortunes, sorrows, and reverses, but everybody believes that he will ultimately triumph, because they know there is no keeping him down. Does he keep at it? Is he persistent? Is the question which the world asks of a man. Even the man with small ability will often succeed if he has the quality of persistence, where a genius without persistence would fail. "How hard I worked at that tremendous shorthand, and all improvement appertaining to it," said Dickens. I will only add to what I have already written of my perseverance at this time of my life, and of a patient and continuous energy which then began to be matured within me, and which I know to be the strong point of my character, if it have any strength at all, that there, on looking back, I find the source of my success. "I am sorry to say that I don't think this is in your line," said Woodfall the reporter, after Sheridan had made his first speech in Parliament. "You had better have stuck to your former pursuits." With his head on his hand, Sheridan mused for a time, then looked up and said, "It is in me, and it shall come out of me." From the same man came that harangue against Warren Hastings, which the orator Fox called the best speech ever made in the House of Commons. "The man who is perpetually hesitating which of two things he will do first," said William Wirt, "will do neither. The man who resolves, but suffers his resolution to be changed by the first counter-suggestion of a friend, who fluctuates from opinion to opinion, from plan to plan, and veers like a weathercock to every point of the compass, with every breath of caprice that blows, can never accomplish anything great or useful. Instead of being progressive in anything, he will be at best stationary, and more probably retrograde in all." Great writers have ever been noted for their tenacity of purpose. Their works have not been flung off from minds aglow with genius, but have been elaborated and elaborated into grace and beauty, until every trace of their efforts has been obliterated. Bishop Butler worked 20 years incessantly on his Analogy, and even then was so dissatisfied that he wanted to burn it. Rousseau says he obtained the ease and grace of his style only by ceaseless inquietude, by endless botches and erasures. Virgil worked 11 years on the Aeneid. The notebooks of great men like Hawthorne and Emerson are telltales of enormous drudgery, of the years put into a book which may be read in an hour. Montesquieu was 25 years writing his Esprit de Loi, yet you can read it in 60 minutes. Adam Smith spent 10 years on his Wealth of Nations. A rival playwright once laughed at Euripides for spending 3 days on 3 lines, when he had written 500 lines. But your 500 lines in 3 days will be dead and forgotten, while my 3 lines will live forever, replied Euripides. Sir Fowell Buxton thought he could do as well as others if he devoted twice as much time and labor as they did. Ordinary means and extraordinary application have done most of the great things in the world. Defoe offered the manuscript of Robinson Crusoe to many booksellers, and all but one refused it. Addison's first play, Rosamond, was hissed off the stage, but the editor of the Spectator and Tatler was made of stern stuff, and was determined that the world should listen to him, and it did. David Livingstone said, "Those who have never carried a book through the press can form no idea of the amount of toil it involves. The process has increased my respect for authors 1,000-fold. I think I would rather cross the African continent again than undertake to write another book." "For the statistics of the Negro population of South America alone," says Robert Dale Owen, "I examined more than 150 volumes." Another author tells us that he wrote paragraphs and whole pages of his book as many as 50 times. It is said of one of Longfellow's poems that it was written in 4 weeks, but that he spent 6 months in correcting and cutting it down. Bulwer declared that he had written some of his briefer productions as many as 8 or 9 times before their publication. One of Tennyson's pieces was rewritten 50 times. John Owen was 20 years on his commentary on the Epistle to the Hebrews, Gibbon on his Decline and Fall 20 years, and Adam Clarke on his commentary 26 years. Carlyle spent 15 years on his Frederick the Great. A great deal of time is consumed in reading before some books are prepared. George Eliot read 1,000 books before she wrote Daniel Deronda. Alison read 2,000 before he completed his history. It is said of another that he read 20,000 and wrote only 2 books. Virgil spent several years on the Georgics, which could be printed in 2 columns of an ordinary newspaper. "Generally speaking," said Sidney Smith, "the life of all truly great men has been a life of intense and incessant labor. They have commonly passed the first half of life in the gross darkness of indigent humility, overlooked, mistaken, condemned by weaker men, thinking while others slept, reading while others rioted, feeling something within them that told them that they should not always be kept down among the dregs of the world. And then, when their time has come, and some little accident has given them their first occasion, they have burst out into the light and glory of public life, rich with the spoils of time, and mighty in all the labors and struggles of the mind." Malibran said, "If I neglect my practice a day, I see the difference in my execution. If for 2 days, my friends see it. And if for a week, all the world knows my failure." Constant, persistent struggle she found to be the price of her marvelous power. "If I am building a mountain," said Confucius, "and stop before the last basketful of earth is placed on the summit, I have failed." "Young gentlemen," said Francis Wayland, "remember that nothing can stand day's work." America will never produce any great art until our resources are developed and we get more time. As a people, we have not yet learned the art of patience. We do not know how to wait. Think of an American artist spending 7, 8, 10, and even 12 years on a single painting, as did Titian, Michelangelo, and many of the other old masters. Think of an American sculptor spending years and years upon a single masterpiece, as did the Greeks and Romans. We have not yet learned the secret of working and waiting. "The single element in all the progressive movements of my pencil," said the great David Wilkie, "was persevering industry." The kind of ability which most men rank highest is that which enables its possessor to do what he undertakes, and attain the object of his ambition or desire. The reader of a newspaper does not see the first insertion of an ordinary advertisement, says a French writer. The second insertion he sees but does not read. The third insertion he reads. The fourth insertion he looks at the price. The fifth insertion he speaks of it to his wife. The sixth insertion he is ready to purchase, and the seventh insertion he purchases. The large fees which make us envy the great lawyer or doctor are not remuneration for the few minutes' labor of giving advice, but for the mental stores gathered during the precious spare moments of many a year while others were sleeping or enjoying holidays. A client will frequently object to paying $50 for an opinion written in 5 minutes. But such an opinion could be written only by one who has read 100 law books. If the lawyer had not previously read those books, but should keep a client waiting until he could read them with care, there would be fewer complaints that fees of this kind are not earned. We are told that perseverance built the pyramids on Egypt's plains, erected the gorgeous temple at Jerusalem, enclosed in adamant the Chinese Empire, scaled the stormy cloud-capped Alps, opened a highway through the watery wilderness of the Atlantic, leveled the forests of the New World, and reared in its stead a community of states and nations. Perseverance has wrought from the marble block the exquisite creations of genius, painted on canvas the gorgeous mimicry of nature, and engraved, on a metallic surface, the viewless substance of the shadow. Perseverance has put in motion millions of spindles, winged as many flying shuttles, harnessed thousands of iron steeds to as many freighted cars, and sent them flying from town to town and nation to nation, tunneled mountains of granite, and annihilated space with the lightning's speed. Perseverance has whitened the waters of the world with the sails of 100 nations, navigated every sea, and explored every land. Perseverance has reduced nature in her 1,000 forms to as many sciences, taught her laws, prophesied her future movements, measured her untrodden spaces, counted her myriad hosts of worlds, and computed their distances, dimensions, and velocities. Whoever is resolved to excel in painting, or indeed in any other art, said Reynolds, must bring all his mind to bear upon that one object from the moment that he rises till he goes to bed. "If you work hard 2 weeks without selling a book," wrote a publisher to an agent, "you will make a success of it." "Know thy work and do it," said Carlyle, "and work at it like a Hercules. One monster there is in the world, an idle man." End of chapter 17. Recording by David Martin.
Chapter 18 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 18. Save. If you want to test a young man and ascertain whether nature made him for a king or a subject, give him $1,000 and see what he will do with it. If he is born to conquer and command, he will put it quietly away till he is ready to use it as opportunity offers. If he is born to serve, he will immediately begin to spend it in gratifying his ruling propensity. Parton. The man who builds and lacks wherewith to pay, provides a home from which to run away. Young. Buy what thou hast no need of, and ere long thou shalt sell thy necessaries. For age and want save while you may. No morning sun lasts a whole day. Franklin. Whatever be your talents, whatever be your prospects, never speculate away on a chance of a palace that which you might need as a provision against the workhouse. Bulwer. What do you do with all these books? Oh, that library is my one cigar a day, was the response. What do you mean? Mean? Just this. When you bothered me about being a man and learning to smoke, I'd just been reading about a young fellow who bought books with money that others would have spent in smoke, and I thought I'd try and do the same. You remember, I said I should allow myself one cigar a day. Yes. Well, I never smoked. I just put by the price of a 5-cent cigar every day, and as the money accumulated I bought books, the books you see there. Do you mean to say that those books cost no more than that? Why, there are dollars worth of them. Yes, I know there are. I had 6 years more of my apprenticeship to serve when you persuaded me to be a man. I put by the money I have told you of, which of course at 5 cents a day amounted to $18.25 a year, or $109.50 in 6 years. I keep those books by themselves as a result of my apprenticeship cigar money, and if you'd done as I did, you would by this time have saved many, many more dollars than that, and been in business besides. If a man will begin at the age of 20 and lay by 26 cents every working day, investing at 7% compound interest, he will have $32,000 when he is 70 years old. 20 cents a day is no unusual expenditure for beer or cigars, yet in 50 years it would easily amount to $20,000. Even a saving of $1 a week from the date of one's majority would give him $1,000 for each of the last 10 of the allotted years of life. What maintains one vice would bring up 2 children. Who does not feel honored by his relationship to Dr. Franklin, whether as a townsman or a countryman, or even as belonging to the same race? Who does not feel a sort of personal complacency in that frugality of his youth which laid the foundation for so much competence and generosity in his mature age? In that wise discrimination of his outlays, which held the culture of the soul in absolute supremacy over the pleasures of the sense, and in that consummate mastership of the great art of living, which has carried his practical wisdom into every cottage in Christendom, and made his name immortal? And yet how few there are among us who would not disparage, nay, ridicule and contemn a young man who should follow Franklin's example. Washington examined the minutest expenditures of his family, even when President of the United States. He understood that without economy none can be rich, and with it none need be poor. Napoleon examined his domestic bills himself, detected overcharges and errors. Unfortunately, Congress can pass no law that will remedy the vice of living beyond one's means. We are ruined, says Colton, not by what we really want, but by what we think we do. Therefore, never go abroad in search of your wants. If they be real wants, they will come home in search of you. For he that buys what he does not want will soon want what he cannot buy. I hope that there will not be another sale, exclaimed Horace Walpole, for I have not an inch of room nor a farthing left. A woman once bought an old door plate with Thompson on it, because she thought it might come in handy sometime. The habit of buying what you don't need because it is cheap encourages extravagance. Many have been ruined by buying good pennyworths. Barnum tells the story of one of his acquaintances whose wife would have a new and elegant sofa, which in the end cost him $30,000. When the sofa reached the house it was found necessary to get chairs "to match," then sideboards, carpets, and tables to correspond with them, and so on through the entire stock of furniture, when at last it was found that the house itself was quite too small and old-fashioned for the furniture, and a new one was built to correspond with the sofa, and et ceteras. Thus, added my friend, running up an outlay of $30,000 caused by that single sofa, and saddling on me in the shape of servants, equipage, and the necessary expenses attendant on keeping up a fine establishment, a yearly outlay of $11,000, and a habit of extravagance which was a constant menace to my prosperity. Cicero said, "Not to have a mania for buying is to possess a revenue." Many are carried away by the habit of bargain buying. Here's something wonderfully cheap, let's buy it. Have you any use for it? No, not at present, but it is sure to come in useful sometime. Annual income, says Micawber, £20 annual expenditure, 19.6 result happiness. Annual income £20 annual expenditure, £20 ought and 6 result misery. Hunger, rags, cold, hard work, contempt, suspicion, unjust reproach are disagreeable, says Horace Greeley, but debt is infinitely worse than them all. If I had but 50 cents a week to live on, said Greeley, I'd buy a peck of corn and parch it before I'd owe any man $1. To find out uses for the persons or things which are now wasted in life is to be the glorious work of the men of the next generation, and that which will contribute most to their enrichment. Economizing "in spots" or by freaks is no economy at all. It must be done by management. Let us learn the meaning of economy. Economy is a high, humane office, a sacrament when its aim is great, when it is the prudence of simple tastes, when it is practiced for freedom or love or devotion. Much of the economy we see in houses is of a base origin, and is best kept out of sight. Parched corn eaten today that I may have roast fowl for my dinner on Sunday is a baseness, but parched corn and a house with one apartment, that I may be free of all perturbations, that I may be serene and docile to what the mind shall speak, and girt and road ready for the lowest mission of knowledge or good will, is frugality for gods and heroes. Like many other boys, P.T. Barnum picked up pennies driving oxen for his father, but unlike many other boys he would invest these earnings in knickknacks which he would sell to others on every holiday, thus increasing his pennies to dollars. The eccentric John Randolph once sprang from his seat in the House of Representatives, and exclaimed in his piercing voice, "Mr. Speaker, I have found it!" And then, in the stillness which followed this strange outburst, he added, "I have found the philosopher's stone. It is pay as you go." In France, all classes, the men as well as the women, study the economy of cookery and practice it, and there, as many travelers affirm, the people live at 1/3 the expense of Englishmen or Americans. There they know how to make savory messes out of remnants that others would throw away. There they cook no more for each day than is required for that day. With them the art ranks with the fine arts, and a great cook is as much honored and respected as a sculptor or a painter. The consequence is, as ex-Secretary McCulloch thinks, a French village of 1,000 inhabitants could be supported luxuriously on the waste of one of our large American hotels, and he believes that the entire population of France could be supported on the food which is literally wasted in the United States. Professor Blott, who resided for some years in the United States, remarks pathetically that here, where the markets rival the best markets of Europe, it is really a pity to live as many do live. There are thousands of families in moderately good circumstances who have never eaten a loaf of really good bread, nor tasted a well-cooked steak, nor sat down to a properly prepared meal. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends, in cutting off 2d. from the laundress bill, and doing all sorts of little, mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply only in one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a halfpenny, where they ought to spend 2 pence, that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. Punch, in speaking of this one idea class of people, says, "They are like a man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner, and then hired a coach and four to take it home. I never knew a man to succeed by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer, if necessary. Dispense with the new pair of gloves, live on plainer food if need be, so that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. A penny here and a dollar there placed at interest go on accumulating, and in this way the desired result is obtained." "I wish I could write all across the sky in letters of gold," says Rev. William Marsh, "the one word, Savings Bank." Boston savings banks have $130,000,000 on deposit, mostly saved in driblets. Josiah Quincy used to say that the servant girls built most of the palaces on Beacon Street. "Nature uses a grinding economy," says Emerson, "working up all that is wasted today into tomorrow's creation, not a superfluous grain of sand for all the ostentation she makes of expense and public works. She flung us out in her plenty, but we cannot shed a hair or a paring of a nail, but instantly she snatches at the shred and appropriates it to her general stock. Last summer's flowers and foliage decayed in autumn only to enrich the earth this year for other forms of beauty. Nature will not even wait for our friends to see us unless we die at home. The moment the breath has left the body, she begins to take us to pieces, that the parts may be used again for other creations. So apportion your wants that your means may exceed them," says Bulwer. "With £100 a year I may need no man's help. I may at least have my crust of bread and liberty. But with £5,000 a year I may dread a ring at my bell. I may have my tyrannical master in servants whose wages I cannot pay. My exile may be at the fiat of the first long-suffering man who enters a judgment against me. For the flesh that lies nearest my heart some Shylock may be dusting his scales and whetting his knife. Every man is needy who spends more than he has. No man is needy who spends less. I may so ill manage, that with £5,000 a year I purchase the worst evils of poverty, terror and shame. I may so well manage my money, that with £100 a year I purchase the best blessings of wealth, safety and respect. End of chapter 18. Recording by Lee Smalley.
Chapter 19 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 19. Live Upward. Do what thou dost, as if the stake were heaven, and this thy last deed ere the judgment day. If you wish to reach the highest, begin at the lowest. Publius Syrius. What is a man, if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more. Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to rust in us unused. Shakespeare. Ambition is a spur that makes man struggle with destiny. It is heaven's own incentive to make purpose great and achievement greater. Anonymous. Not failure, but low aim is crime. Endeavour to be first in thy calling, whatever it may be. Neither let anyone go before thee in well-doing. Oh, may I join the choir invisible of those immortal dead who live again, in minds made better by their presence, live in pulses stirred to generosity, in deeds of daring rectitude, in scorn for miserable aims that end with self, in thoughts sublime that pierce the night like stars, and with their mild persistent urge man's search to vaster issues. George Eliot. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and myself have founded empires, said Napoleon to Montholon at St. Helena. But upon what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ alone founded his empire on love, and at this moment millions of men would die for him. I die before my time, and my body will be given back to worms. Such is the fate of him who has been called the great Napoleon. What an abyss between my deep misery and the eternal kingdom of Christ, which is proclaimed, loved, and adored, and which is extended over the whole earth. Call you this dying? Is it not rather living? The death of Christ is the death of a god. No true man can live a half-life, says Philip Brooks, when he has genuinely learnt that it is a half-life. The other half, the higher half, must haunt him. Ideality, says Horace Mann, is only the avant courier of the mind, and where that in a healthy and normal state goes, I hold it to be a prophecy that realization can follow. If the certainty of future fame bore Milton rejoicing through his blindness, or cheered Galileo in his dungeon, writes Bulwer, what stronger and holier support shall not be given to him who has loved mankind as his brothers and devoted his labours to their cause, who has not sought but relinquished his own renown, who has braved the present censures of men for their future benefit, and trampled upon glory in the energy of benevolence. Will there not be for him something more powerful than fame to comfort his sufferings and to sustain his hopes? If I live, wrote Rufus Choate in his diary in September of 1844, all blockheads which are shaken at certain mental peculiarities shall know and feel a reasoner, a lawyer, and a man of business. I have read that none of the humbler races have the muscle by which man turns his eye upward, though I am not anatomist enough to be sure of the fact. Show me a contented slave, says Burke, and I will show you a degraded man. They truly are faithful, says one writer, who devote their entire lives to amendment. General Grant said of the Chinese wall, I believe that the labour expended on this wall could have built every railroad in the United States, every canal and highway, and most, if not all, of our cities. The real benefactors of mankind, says Emerson, are the men and women who can raise their fellow beings out of the world of corn and money, who make them forget their bank account by interesting them in their higher selves, who can raise mere money-getters into the intellectual realm, where they will cease to measure greatness and happiness by dollars and cents, who can make men forget their stomachs and feast on being's banquet. Men are not so much mistaken in desiring to advance themselves, said Beecher, as in judging what will be an advance, and what the right method of obtaining it. An ambition which has conscience in it will always be a laborious and faithful engineer, and will build the road and bridge the chasms between itself and the eminent success by the most faithful and minute performances of duty. The liberty to go higher than we are is given only when we have fulfilled amply the duty of our present sphere. Thus men are to rise upon their performances and not upon their discontent. And this is the secret and golden meaning of the command to be content in whatever sphere we are placed. It is not to be the content of indifference, of indolence, of unambitious stupidity, but the content of industrious fidelity. When men are building the foundations of vast structures, they must needs labour far below the surface, and in disagreeable conditions. But every course of stone which they lay raises them higher, and at length, when they reach the surface, they have laid such solid work under them that they need not fear now to carry up their walls through towering stories till they overlook the whole neighbourhood. A man proves himself fit to go higher who shows that he is faithful where he is. A man that will not do well in his present place because he longs to be higher is fit neither to be where he is or yet above it. He is already too high and should be put lower. Do that which is assigned thee, and thou canst not hope too much or dare too much. What a man does that he has, in himself, in his might, don't waste life on doubts and fears. Spend yourself on the work before you, well assured that the performance of this hour's duties will be the best preparation for the hours or ages that follow it. Tradition says that when Solomon received the gift of an emerald vase from the Queen of Sheba, He filled it with an elixir which he only knew how to prepare, one drop of which would prolong life indefinitely. A dying criminal begged for a drop of the precious fluid, but Solomon refused to prolong a wicked life. When good men asked for it, they were refused, or failed to obtain it when promised, as the king would forget or prefer not to open the vase to get but a single drop. When at last the king became ill and bade his servants bring the vase, he found that the contents had all evaporated. So it is often with our hope, our faith, our ambition, our aspiration. A man cannot aspire if he looks down. God has not created us with aspirations and longings for heights to which we cannot climb. Live upward. The unattained still beckons us towards the summit of life's mountains, into the atmosphere where great souls live and breathe and have their being. Even hope is but a promise of the possibility of its own fulfilment. Life should be lived in earnest. It is no idle game, no farce to amuse and be forgotten. It is a stern reality, fuller of duties than the sky of stars. You cannot have too much of that yearning which we call aspiration. For even though you do not attain your ideal, the efforts you make will bring nothing but blessing, while he who fails of attaining mere worldly goals is too often eaten up with the canker worm of disappointed ambition. To all will come a time when the love of glory will be seen to be but a splendid delusion, riches empty, rank vain, power dependent, and all outward advantages without inward peace a mere mockery of wretchedness. The wisest men have taken care to uproot selfish ambition from their breasts. Shakespeare considered it so near a vice as to need extenuating circumstances to make it a virtue. Who has not noticed the power of love in an awkward, crabbed, shiftless, lazy man? He becomes gentle, chaste in language, energetic. Love brings out the poetry in him. It is only an idea, a sentiment, and yet what magic it has wrought! Nothing we can see has touched the man, yet he is entirely transformed. Not less does ambition completely transform a human being, for a woman thirsting for fame can work where a man equally resolute would faint. He despises ease and sloth, welcomes toil and hardship, and shakes even kingdoms to gratify his master passion. Mere ambition has impelled many a man to a life of eminence and usefulness. Its higher manifestation, aspiration, has led him beyond the stars. If the aim be right, the life in its details cannot be far wrong. Your heart must inspire what your hands execute, or the work will be poorly done. The hand cannot reach higher than does the heart. But do not strive to reach impossible goals. It is wholly in your power to develop yourself, but not necessarily so to make yourself a king. How many presidents of the United States or prime ministers of England are chosen within the working lifetime of a man? What if 1,000 young men resolve to become president or prime minister? While such prizes are within your reach, remember that your will must be tremendous and your qualifications of the highest order, or you cannot hope to secure them. Too many are deluded by ambition beyond their power of attainment, or tortured by aspirations totally disproportionate to their capacity for execution. You may indeed confidently hope to become eminent in usefulness and power, but only as you build upon a broad foundation of self-culture, while as a rule specialists in ambition, as in science, are apt to become narrow and one-sided. Darwin was very fond of poetry and music when young, but after devoting his life to science, he was surprised to find Shakespeare tedious. He said that if he were to live his life again, he would read poetry and hear music every day, so as not to lose the power of appreciating such things. God asks no man whether he will accept life. That is not the choice. You must take it. The only choice is how. When I found out I was black, said Dumas, I resolved to live as if I were white, and so force men to look below my skin. In the collection of the Massachusetts Historical Society is a prospectus used by Longfellow in canvassing, on one of the blank leaves of which are the skeleton stanzas of Excelsior, which he was evidently evolving as he trudged from house to house. Disregarding the honours that most men value, and looking to the truth, said Plato, I shall endeavour in reality to live as virtuously as I can, and when I die, to die so, and I invite all other men to the utmost of my power, and you too I invite this contest, which, I affirm, surpasses all contests here. Did you ever hear of a man who had striven all his life faithfully and singly toward an object, and in no measure obtained it? Asked Thoreau. If a man constantly aspires, is he not elevated? Did ever a man try heroism, magnanimity, truth, and sincerity, and find there was no advantage in them, that it was a vain endeavour? Oh, if the stone can only have some vision of the temple of which it is to be a part for ever! Exclaimed Phillips Brooks. What patience must fill it as it feels the blows of the hammer, and knows that success for it is simply to let itself be wrought into what shape the master wills. Man never reaches heights above his habitual thought. It is not enough now and then to mount on wings of ecstasy into the infinite. We must habitually dwell there. The great man is he who abides easily on heights to which others rise occasionally and with difficulty. Don't let the maxims of low prudence daily dinned into your ears lower the tone of your high ambition, or check your aspirations. Hope lifts us step by step up the mysterious ladder, the top of which no eye hath ever seen. Though we do not find what hope promised, yet we are stronger for the climbing, and we get a broader outlook upon life, which repays the effort. Indeed, if we do not follow where hope beckons, we gradually slide down the ladder in despair. Strive ever to be at the top of your condition. A high standard is absolutely necessary. End of chapter 19.
Chapter 20 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 20. Sand. I shall show the cinders of my spirits through the ashes of my chance. Shakespeare. Perseverance is a virtue that wins each godlike act, and plucks success even from the spear-proofed crest of rugged danger. William Harvard. Never say fail again. Richelieu. It is the one neck nearer that wins the race and shows the blood, the one pull more of the oar that proves the beefiness of the fellow, as Oxford men say. It is the one march more that wins the campaign, the 5 minutes more persistent courage that wins the fight. Though your force be less than another's, you equal and outmaster your opponent if you continue it longer and concentrate it more. Smiles. I know no such unquestionable badge and ensign of a sovereign mind as that tenacity of purpose which through all changes of companions or parties or fortunes changes never, bates no jot of heart or hope, but wearies out opposition and arrives at its port. "Well done, Tommy Brooks!" exclaimed his teacher in pleased surprise, when the dunce of the school spoke his piece without omitting a single word. The other boys had laughed when he rose, for they expected a bad failure. But when the rest of the class had tried, the teacher said Tommy had done the best of all, and gave him the prize. "And now tell me," said she, "how you learned the poem so well." "Please, ma'am, it was the snail on the wall that taught me how to do it," said Tommy. At this the other pupils laughed aloud, but the teacher said, "You need not laugh, boys, for we may learn much from such things as snails. How did the snail teach you, Tommy?" "I saw it crawl up the wall, little by little," replied the boy. "It did not stop nor turn back, but went on and on. And I thought I would do the same with the poem. So I learned it little by little, and did not give up. By the time the snail reached the top of the wall, I had learned the whole poem. I may here impart the secret of what is called good and bad luck, said Addison. There are men who, supposing Providence to have an implacable spite against them, bemoan in the poverty of old age the misfortunes of their lives. Luck forever runs against them and for others. One with a good profession lost his luck in the river, where he idled away his time a-fishing. Another with a good trade perpetually burnt up his luck by his hot temper, which provoked all his employees to leave him. Another with a lucrative business lost his luck by amazing diligence at everything but his own business. Another who steadily followed his trade, as steadily followed the bottle. Another who was honest and constant to his work, erred by his perpetual misjudgment. He lacked discretion. Hundreds lose their luck by indulging sanguine expectations, by trusting fraudulent men, and by dishonest gains. A man never has good luck who has a bad wife. I never knew an early rising, hard working, prudent man, careful of his earnings and strictly honest, who complained of his bad luck. A good character, good habits, and iron industry are impregnable to the assaults of the ill luck that fools are dreaming of. But when I see a tatterdemalion creeping out of a grocery late in the forenoon, with his hands stuck into his pockets, the rim of his hat turned up and the crown knocked in, I know he has had bad luck, for the worst of all luck is to be a sluggard, a knave, or a tippler. "You have a difficult subject," said Anthony Trollope at Niagara Falls to an artist who had attempted to draw the spray of the waters. "All subjects are difficult," was the reply, "to a man who desires to do well." "But yours, I fear, is impossible," said Trollope. "You have no right to say so, till I have finished my picture," protested the artist. "Tell Louisa to stick to her teaching. She can never succeed as a writer." When her father delivered the rejected manuscript of a story sent to James T. Fields, editor of the Atlantic Monthly, with the above message, Miss Alcott said, "Tell him I will succeed as a writer, and some day I shall write for the Atlantic." Not long after, she sent an article to the Atlantic and received a check for $50. With the money, she said, she bought a second-hand carpet for the parlor, a bonnet for her sister, shoes and stockings for herself. Her father was calling upon Longfellow some time after this, when Longfellow took the Atlantic and said, "I want to read to you Emerson's fine poem upon Thoreau's flute." Mr. Alcott interrupted him with delight, and said, "My daughter Louisa wrote that." "Men talk as if victory were something fortunate," says Emerson. "Work is victory. Wherever work is done, victory is obtained. There is no chance and no blanks. You want but one verdict. If you have your own, you are secure of the rest. But if witnesses are wanted, witnesses are near." "Young gentlemen," says Francis Wayland, "remember that nothing can stand day's work." Alexander the Great exclaimed to his soldiers, disaffected after a long campaign, "Go home, and tell them that you left Alexander to conquer the world alone." "We discount only our own bills, and not those of private persons," said the cashier of the Bank of England, when a large bill was drawn by Anselm Rothschild of Frankfort, on Nathan Rothschild of London. "Private persons!" exclaimed Nathan, when told of the cashier's remark. "I will make these gentlemen see what sort of private persons we are." 3 weeks later he presented a £5 note at the bank at the opening of the office. The teller counted out 5 sovereigns, looking surprised that Baron Rothschild should have troubled himself about such a trifle. The Baron examined the coins one by one, weighing them in the balance, as he said the law gave him the right to do, put them into a little canvas bag, and offered a second, and then a third, fourth, 50th, 1,000th note. When a bag was full, he handed it to a clerk in waiting, and proceeded to fill another. In 7 hours he had changed £21,000, and with 9 employees of his house similarly engaged, had occupied the tellers so busily in changing $1,050,000 worth of notes that no one else could receive attention. The bankers laughed, but the next morning Rothschild appeared with his 9 clerks and several drays to carry away the gold, remarking, "These gentlemen refuse to pay my bills. I have sworn not to keep theirs. They can pay at their leisure, only I notify them that I have enough to employ them for 2 months." The smiles faded from the features of the bank officials as they thought of a draft of $55,000,000 in gold which they did not hold. Next morning notice was given in the newspapers that the Bank of England would pay Rothschild's bills as well as its own. "Well," said Barnum to a friend in 1841, "I am going to buy the American Museum." "Buy it!" exclaimed the astonished friend, who knew that the showman had not a dollar. "What do you intend buying it with?" "Brass," was the prompt reply, "for silver and gold have I none." Everyone interested in public entertainments in New York knew Barnum, and knew the condition of his pocket. But Francis Olmsted, who owned the museum building, consulted numerous references, all telling of "a good showman who would do as he agreed," and accepted a proposition to give security for the purchaser. Mr. Olmsted was to appoint a money taker at the door, and credit Barnum toward the purchase with all above expenses and an allowance of $50 per month to support his wife and 3 children. Mrs. Barnum gladly assented to the arrangement, and offered, if need be, to cut down the household expenses to a little more than $1 a day. Some 6 months later Mr. Olmsted happened to enter the ticket office at noon, and found Barnum eating for dinner a few slices of bread and some corned beef. "Is this the way you eat your dinner?" he asked. "I have not eaten a warm dinner since I bought the museum, except on the Sabbath, and I intend never to eat another until I get out of debt." "Ah, you are safe, and will pay for the museum before the year is out," said Mr. Olmsted, slapping the young man approvingly on the shoulder. He was right, for in less than a year Barnum had paid every cent out of the profits of the establishment. A noted philosopher said, "The favors of fortune are like steep rocks. Only eagles and creeping things mount to the summit." Lord Campbell, who became Chief Justice and Lord Chancellor of England, and amassed a large fortune, began life as a drudge in a printing office. A little observation shows us that, as a rule, the men who accomplish the most in the world are the most useful and sensible members of society, the men who are depended upon most in emergencies, the men of backbone and stamina, the bone and sinew of their communities, the men who can always be relied upon, who are healthiest and happiest, are, as a rule, of ordinary mental caliber and medium capacity, but with persistent and untiring industry, these are they, after all, who carry the burdens and reap the prizes of life. It is the men and women who keep everlastingly at it, who do not believe themselves geniuses, but who know that if they ever accomplish anything great, they must do it by common drudgery and persistent industry, and with an unwavering aim in one pursuit. Those who believe themselves geniuses are apt to scatter their efforts and thus fritter away their great energies without accomplishing anything in proportion to their high promise. Often the men who promise the most pay the least. Mrs. Frank Leslie often refers to the time she lived in her carpetless attic while striving to pay her husband's obligations. She has fought her way successfully through 9 lawsuits and has paid the entire debt. She manages her 10 publications entirely herself, signs all checks and money orders, makes all contracts, looks over all proofs, and approves the makeup of everything before it goes to press. She has developed great business ability which no one dreamed she possessed. A little boy was asked how he learned to skate. "Oh, by getting up every time I fell down," he replied. The boy Thorwaldsen, whose father died in the poorhouse, and whose education was so scanty that he had to write his letters over many times before they could be posted, by his indomitable perseverance, tenacity, and grit, fascinated the world with the genius which neither his discouraging father, poverty, nor hardship could repress. "It is all very well," said Charles J. Fox, "to tell me that a young man has distinguished himself by a brilliant first speech. He may go on, or he may be satisfied with his first triumph. But show me a man who has not succeeded at first, and nevertheless has gone on, and I will back that young man to do better than most of those who have succeeded at the first trial." It was the last 3 days of the first voyage of Columbus that told. All his years of struggle and study would have availed nothing if he had yielded to the mutiny. It was all in those 3 days. But what days! "Often defeated in battle," said Macaulay of Alexander the Great, "he was always successful in war." He might have said the same of Washington, and, with appropriate changes, of all who win great triumphs of any kind. One of the greatest preachers of modern times, Lacordaire, failed again and again. Everybody said he would never make a preacher, but he was determined to succeed, and in 2 years from his humiliating failures he was preaching in Notre Dame to immense congregations. Orange Judd was a remarkable example of success through grit. He earned corn by working for farmers, carried it on his back to mill, brought back the meal to his room, cooked it himself, milked cows for his pint of milk per day, and lived on mush and milk for months together. He worked his way through Wesleyan University, and took a 3 years postgraduate course at Yale. Oh, the triumphs of this indomitable spirit of the conqueror! This it was that enabled Franklin to dine on a small loaf in the printing office with a book in his hand. It helped Locke to live on bread and water in a Dutch garret. It enabled Gideon Lee to go barefoot in the snow, half starved and thinly clad. It sustained Lincoln and Garfield on their hard journeys from the log cabin to the White House. The very reputation of being strong-willed, plucky, and indefatigable is of priceless value. It often cows enemies, and dispels at the start opposition to one's undertakings which would otherwise be formidable. When you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, till it seems as if you could not hold on a minute longer, said Harriet Beecher Stowe, never give up then, for that's just the place and time that the tide'll turn. Never despair, says Burke, but if you do, work on in despair. Once when Marshal Ney was going into battle, looking down at his knees which were smiting together, he said, "You may well shake. You would shake worse yet if you knew where I am going to take you." "Go it, William," an old boxer was overheard saying to himself in the midst of a fight. "At him again. Never say die. A striking incident is related of the early experience of George Law, who in his day was one of the most conspicuous financiers and capitalists of New York City. When he was a young man, he went to New York, poor and friendless. One day he was walking along the streets, hungry, not knowing where his next meal would come from, and passed a new building in course of erection. Through some accident one of the hod carriers fell from the structure and dropped dead at his feet. Young Law, in his desperation, applied for the job to take the dead man's place, and the place was given him. He went to work, and this was how one of the wealthiest and shrewdest New York businessmen got his start. See young Disraeli, sprung from a hated and persecuted race, without opportunity, pushing his way up through the middle classes, up through the upper classes, until he stands self-poised upon the topmost round of political and social power. Scoffed, ridiculed, rebuffed, hissed from the House of Commons, he simply says, "The time will come when you will hear me." The time did come, and the boy with no chance swayed the scepter of England for a quarter of a century. If impossibilities ever exist, popularly speaking, they ought to have been found somewhere between the birth and the death of Kitto, that deaf pauper and master of Oriental learning. But Kitto did not find them there. In the presence of his decision and imperial energy, they melted away. Kitto begged his father to take him out of the poorhouse, even if he had to subsist like the Hottentots. He told him that he would sell his books and pawn his handkerchief, by which he thought he could raise about 12 shillings. He said he could live upon blackberries, nuts, and field turnips, and was willing to sleep on a hayrick. Here was real grit. What were impossibilities to such a resolute will? Patrick Henry voiced that decision which characterized the great men of the Revolution when he said, "Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." Look at Garrison reading this advertisement in a Southern paper. $5,000 will be paid for the head of W.L. Garrison by the governor of Georgia. Behold him again. A broadcloth mob is leading him through the streets of Boston by a rope. He is hurried to jail. See him return calmly and unflinchingly to his work, beginning at the point at which he was interrupted. Note this heading in The Liberator, the type of which he set himself in an attic on State Street in Boston. "I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch. And I will be heard." Was Garrison heard? Ask a race set free largely by his efforts. Even the gallows erected in front of his own door did not daunt him. He held the ear of an unwilling world with that burning word, freedom, which was destined never to cease its vibrations until it had breathed its sweet secret to the last slave. At a time when abolitionists were dangerously unpopular, a crowd of brawny Cape Cod fishermen had made such riotous demonstrations that all the speakers announced, except Stephen Foster and Lucy Stone, had fled from an open-air platform. "You had better run, Stephen," said she. "They are coming." "But who will take care of you?" asked Foster. "This gentleman will take care of me," she replied, calmly laying her hand within the arm of a burly rioter with a club, who had just sprung upon the platform. "What did you say?" stammered the astonished rowdy, as he looked at the little woman. "Yes, I'll take care of you, and no one shall touch a hair of your head." With this, he forced a way for her through the crowd, and at her earnest request, placed her upon a stump, and stood guard with his club while she delivered an address so effective that the audience offered no further violence, and even took up a collection of $20 to repay Mr. Foster for the damage his clothes had received when the riot was at its height. "Luck is ever waiting for something to turn up," says Cobden. "Labor, with keen eyes and strong will turn up something. Luck lies in bed and wishes the postman would bring him the news of a legacy. Labor turns out at 6 o'clock, and with busy pen or ringing hammer lays the foundation of a competence. Luck whines. Labor whistles. Luck relies on chance. Labor on character. There is no luck, for all practical purposes, to him who is not striving, and whose senses are not all eagerly attent. What are called accidental discoveries are almost invariably made by those who are looking for something. A man incurs about as much risk of being struck by lightning as by accidental luck. There is perhaps an element of luck in the amount of success which crowns the efforts of different men, but even here it will usually be found that the sagacity with which the efforts are directed and the energy with which they are prosecuted measure pretty accurately the luck contained in the results achieved. Apparent exceptions will be found to relate almost wholly to single undertakings, while in the long run the rule will hold good. Two pearl divers, equally expert, dive together and work with equal energy. One brings up a pearl, while the other returns empty-handed. But let both persevere, and at the end of 5, 10, or 20 years, it will be found that they succeeded almost in exact proportion to their skill and industry. Lincoln, being asked by an anxious visitor what he would do after 3 or 4 years if the rebellion was not subdued, replied, "Oh, there is no alternative but to keep pegging away." "It is in me, and it shall come out," said Sheridan, when told that he would never make an orator, as he had failed in his first speech in Parliament. He became known as one of the foremost orators of his day. It takes great courage to fight a lost cause when there is no hope even of victory. To contest every inch of ground with as much persistency and enthusiasm as if we were assured of victory, this is true courage. The world admires the man who never flinches from unexpected difficulties, who calmly, patiently, and courageously grapples with his fate, who dies, if need be, at his post. President Chadbourne put grit in place of his lost lung, and worked 35 years after his funeral had been planned. Henry Fawcett put grit in place of eyesight, and became the greatest Postmaster General England ever had. Prescott also put grit in place of eyesight and became one of America's greatest historians. Francis Parkman put grit in place of health and eyesight, and became the greatest historian of America in his line. Thousands of men have put grit in place of health, eyes, ears, hands, legs, and yet have achieved marvelous success. Indeed, most of the great things of the world have been accomplished by grit and pluck. You cannot keep a man down who has these qualities. He will make stepping stones out of his stumbling blocks, and lift himself to success. Grit and pluck are not always exhibited only by poor boys who have no chance, for there are many notable examples of pluck, persistence, and real grit among youth in good circumstances, who never have to fight their way to their own loaf. Mr. Mifflin, who has recently become the head of the celebrated publishing firm of Houghton, Mifflin and Company, is a notable example of persistency, push, and grit. After graduating at Harvard and traveling abroad, he was determined, although not obliged, to work for a living, to get a position at the Riverside Press in Cambridge. He called upon the late Mr. Houghton and asked him for a situation. Mr. Houghton told him that he had no opening, and that even if he had, he did not believe that a graduate from Harvard, who had money and who had traveled abroad, would ever be willing to begin at the bottom and do the necessary drudgery for boy's pay. Mr. Mifflin protested that he was not afraid of hard work, and that he was willing to do anything and take any sort of a position if he could only learn the business. But Mr. Houghton would not give him any encouragement. Again and again Mr. Mifflin came to the Riverside Press and pressed his suit, but to no purpose. Mr. Mifflin persuaded his father to intercede for him, but Mr. Houghton succeeded in convincing him that it would be very unwise for his son to attempt it. But young Mifflin was determined not to give up. Finally Mr. Houghton, out of admiration for his persistence and pluck, made a place for him, which had been occupied by a boy, for $5 a week. Young Mifflin took hold of the work with such earnestness, and showed so much pluck and determination, that Mr. Houghton soon called him into the office and raised his pay to $9 a week from the time he began. Although the young man lived in Boston, he was always at the Riverside Press in Cambridge early in the morning, and would frequently remain after all the others had gone. Mr. Houghton happened to go in late one night, after everybody had gone, as he supposed, and was surprised to find Mr. Mifflin there, taking one of the presses apart. Of course such a young man would be advanced. These are the boys who become the heads of firms. It is victory after victory with the soldier, lesson after lesson with the scholar, blow after blow with the laborer, crop after crop with the farmer, picture after picture with the painter, and mile after mile with the traveler, that secures what all so much desire: success. Stick to the thing and carry it through. Believe you were made for the place you fill, and that no one else can fill it as well. Put forth your whole energies. Be awake, electrify yourself, go forth to the task. Only once learn to carry a thing through in all its completeness and proportion, and you will become a hero. You will think better of yourself. Others will think better of you. The world in its very heart admires the stern, determined doer. End of chapter 20. Recording by David Martin.
Chapter 21 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 21. Above Rubies. The best way to settle the quarrel between capital and labor is by allopathic doses of Peter Cooperism. Talmage. In the sublimest flights of the soul, rectitude is never surmounted, love is never outgrown. Emerson. One ruddy drop of manly blood the surging sea outweighs. Virtue alone outbuilds the pyramids. Her monuments shall last when Egypt's fall. Young. He believed that he was born, not for himself, but for the whole world. Lucan. Wherever man goes to dwell, his character goes with him. African proverb. The spirit of a single mind makes that of multitudes take one direction, as roll the waters to the breathing wind. Byron. No, say what you have to say in her presence too, said King Cleomenes of Sparta, when his visitor, Anastagoras, asked him to send away his little daughter, Gorgo, 10 years old, knowing how much harder it is to persuade a man to do wrong when his child is at his side. So Gorgo sat at her father's feet and listened while the stranger offered more and more money if Cleomenes would aid him to become king in a neighboring country. She did not understand the matter, but when she saw her father look troubled and hesitate, she took hold of his hand and said, "Papa, come away. Come, or this strange man will make you do wrong." The king went away with the child, and saved himself and his country from dishonor. Character is power, even in a child. When grown to womanhood, Gorgo was married to the hero Leonidas. One day a messenger brought a tablet sent by a friend who was a prisoner in Persia, but the closest scrutiny failed to reveal a single word or line on the white waxen surface, and the king and all his noblemen concluded that it was sent as a jest. "Let me take it," said Queen Gorgo, and, after looking it all over, she exclaimed, "There must be some writing underneath the wax." They scraped away the wax and found a warning to Leonidas from the Grecian prisoner, saying that Xerxes was coming with his immense host to conquer all Greece. Acting on this warning, Leonidas and the other kings assembled their armies and checked the mighty host of Xerxes, which is said to have shaken the earth as it marched. I fear John Knox's prayers more than an army of 10,000 men, said Mary, Queen of Scotland. The man behind the sermon, said William M. Evarts, is the secret of John Hall's power. In fact, if there is not a man with a character behind it, nothing about it is of the slightest consequence. Thackeray says, "Nature has written a letter of credit upon some men's faces, which is honored wherever presented. You cannot help trusting such men. Their very presence gives confidence. There is a promise to pay in their very faces which gives confidence, and you prefer it to another man's endorsement. Character is credit." In the great monetary panic of 1857, a meeting was called of the various bank presidents of New York City. When asked what percentage of specie had been drawn during the day, some replied 50%, some even as high as 75%. But Moses Taylor of the City Bank said, "We had in the bank this morning $400,000. This evening, $470,000. While other banks were badly run, the confidence in the City Bank under Mr. Taylor's management was such that people had deposited in that institution what they had drawn from other banks. Character gives confidence. "There is no such thing as a small country," said Victor Hugo. "The greatness of a people is no more affected by the number of its inhabitants than the greatness of an individual is measured by his height." "It is the nature of party in England," said John Russell, "to ask the assistance of men of genius, but to follow the guidance of men of character." "A handful of good life," says George Herbert, is worth a bushel of learning. I have read, Emerson says, that they who listened to Lord Chatham felt that there was something finer in the man than anything which he said. It has been complained of Carlyle that when he has told all his facts about Mirabeau, they do not justify his estimate of the latter's genius. The Gracchi, Agis, Cleomenes, and others of Plutarch's heroes do not in the record of facts equal their own fame. Sir Philip Sidney and Sir Walter Raleigh are men of great figure and of few deeds. We cannot find the smallest part of the personal weight of Washington in the narrative of his exploits. The authority of the name of Schiller is too great for his books. This inequality of the reputation to the works or the anecdotes is not accounted for by saying that the reverberation is longer than the thunderclap, but something resided in these men which begot an expectation that outran all their performance. The largest part of their power was latent. This is that which we call character, a reserved force which acts directly by presence and without means. What others effect by talent or eloquence, the man of character accomplishes by some magnetism. Half his strength he puts not forth. His victories are by demonstration of superiority, and not by crossing bayonets. He conquers because his arrival alters the face of affairs. O Iole, how didst thou know that Hercules was a god? Because, answered Iole, I was content the moment my eyes fell on him. When I beheld Theseus, I desired that I might see him offer battle, or at least drive his horses in a chariot race. But Hercules did not wait for a contest. He conquered whether he stood or walked or sat or whatever else he did. Show me, said Omar the Caliph to Amru the warrior, the sword with which you have fought so many battles and slain so many infidels. Ah, replied Amru, the sword without the arm of the master is no sharper nor heavier than the sword of Pharezdak the poet. So 150 pounds of flesh and blood without character is of no great value. No man throws away his vote, says Francis Willard, when he places it in the ballot box with his conviction behind it. The party which elected Lincoln in 1860 polled only 7,000 votes in 1840. Revolutions never go backward, and the fanaticisms of today are the victories of tomorrow. "Oh, sir, we are beaten," exclaimed the general in command of Sheridan's army, retreating before the victorious Early. "No, sir," replied the indignant Sheridan. "You are beaten, but this army is not beaten." Drawing his sword, he waved it above his head, and pointed it at the pursuing host, while his clarion voice rose above the horrid din in a command to charge once more. The lines paused, turned, and with the ocean's mighty swing, when heaving to the tempest's wing, they hurled them on the foe, and the Confederate army was wildly routed. When the war with France seemed imminent, in 1798, President Adams wrote to George Washington, then a private citizen in retirement at Mount Vernon, "We must have your name, if you will permit us to use it. There will be more efficacy in it than in many an army. Character is power." When Pope Paul IV heard of the death of Calvin, he exclaimed with a sigh, "Ah, the strength of that proud heretic lay in riches? No. Honors? No. But nothing could move him from his course. Holy Virgin, with two such servants, our Church would soon be mistress of both worlds." 1800 years ago, when night closed over the city of Pompeii, a lady sat in her house nursing her son of 10 years of age. The child had been ill for some days. His form was wasted, his little limbs were shrunk, and we may imagine with what infinite anxiety she watched every motion of the helpless one, whose existence was so dear. What did take place we know with an exactness very remarkable. That distant mountain, which reared its awful head on the shore of the bay, Vesuvius, was troubled that same night with an eruption, and threw into the air such clouds of pumice stones that the streets and squares of Pompeii became filled, and gradually the stones grew higher and higher until they reached the level of the windows. There was no chance of escape then by the doors, and those who attempted to get away stepped out of their first-floor windows and rushed over the sulphurous stones, a short distance only, for they were quickly overpowered by the poisonous vapors, and fell dead. After the stones there fell ashes, and after ashes hot water fell in showers, which changed the ashes into clay. Those who ran out of their houses during the fall of stones were utterly consumed, while those who waited until the ashes began to fall perished likewise, but their bodies were preserved by the ashes and water which fell upon them. The Pompeian mother we have mentioned opened the window of her house when she thought the fall of stones was over, and with the child in her arms took a few hurried steps forward, when, overpowered by the sulphur, she fell forward, at which moment the shower of ashes began to fall, and quickly buried mother and child. The hot water afterward changed into a mold. The ashes and the sun baked the fatal clay to such a degree of hardness that it has endured to the present day. A short time ago, the spot where mother and child lay was found, liquid plaster of Paris was poured into the mold formed by the bodies, and then the mold was broken up, leaving the plaster cast whole. Thus, one touching incident in the terrible tragedy of 18 centuries ago has been preserved for the admiration and respect of posterity. The arms and legs of the child showed a contraction and emaciation which could only result from illness. Of the mother, only the right arm was preserved. She fell upon the ashes, and the remaining portion of her body was consumed, but the right hand still clasped the legs of the child. On her arm were 2 gold bracelets, and on her fingers were 2 gold rings, one set with an emerald, the other with a cut amethyst. This touching illustration of a mother's love now rests in the museum of the celebrated city. "I was sitting with Grant once," says General Fisk, "when a major general entered, dressed in the uniform of his rank, who said, 'Boys, I have a good story to tell you. I believe there are no ladies present.' Grant said, 'No, but there are gentlemen present.'" Mr. George W. Childs, in referring to this trait, said, "Another great trait of his character was his purity in every way. I never heard him express or make an indelicate allusion in any way or shape. There is nothing I ever heard that man say that could not be repeated in the presence of women. The writer has heard of several incidents illustrating his answer to impure stories. On one occasion, when Grant formed one of a dinner party of American gentlemen in a foreign city, conversation drifted into references to questionable affairs, when he suddenly rose and said, "Gentlemen, please excuse me, I will retire." When Attila, flushed with conquest, appeared with his barbarian horde before the gates of Rome in 452, Pope Leo alone, of all the people, dared go forth and try to turn his wrath aside. A single magistrate followed him. The Huns were awed by the fearless majesty of the unarmed old man, and led him before their chief, whose respect was so great that he agreed not to enter the city, provided a tribute should be paid to him. Wellington said that Napoleon's presence in the French army was equivalent to 40,000 additional soldiers, and Richter said of the invincible Luther, his words were half battles. "I know of no great men," says Voltaire, "except those who have rendered great services to the human race. Men are measured by what they do, not by what they seem or possess." Francis Horner, of England, was a man of whom Sidney Smith said that the 10 Commandments were stamped upon his forehead. The valuable and peculiar light in which Horner's history is calculated to inspire every right-minded youth is this: he died at the age of 38, possessed of greater influence than any other private man, and admired, beloved, trusted, and deplored by all except the heartless and the base. No greater homage was ever paid in Parliament to any deceased member. How was this attained? By rank? He was the son of an Edinburgh merchant. By wealth? Neither he nor any of his relatives ever had a superfluous sixpence. By office? He held but one, and that for only a few years, of no influence, and with very little pay. By talents? His were not splendid, and he had no genius. Cautious and slow, his only ambition was to be right. By eloquence? He spoke in calm, good taste, without any of the oratory that either terrifies or seduces. By any fascination of manner? His was only correct and agreeable. By what was it, then? Merely by sense, industry, good principles, and a good heart, qualities which no well-constituted mind need ever despair of attaining. It was the force of his character that raised him, and this character was not impressed on him by nature, but formed, out of no peculiarly fine elements, by himself. There were many in the House of Commons of far greater ability and eloquence, but no one surpassed him in the combination of an adequate portion of these with moral worth. Horner was born to show what moderate powers, unaided by anything whatever except culture and goodness, may achieve, even when these powers are displayed amidst the competitions and jealousies of public life. 100 years hence, what difference will it make whether you were rich or poor, a peer or a peasant? But what difference may it not make whether you did what was right or what was wrong? At a large dinner party given by Lord Stratford after the Crimean War, it was proposed that everyone should write on a slip of paper the name which appeared most likely to descend to posterity with renown. When the papers were opened, every one of them contained the name of Florence Nightingale. Professor Blackie of the University of Edinburgh said to a class of young men, "Money is not needful. Power is not needful. Liberty is not needful. Even health is not the one thing needful. But character alone is that which can truly save us. And if we are not saved in this sense, we certainly must be damned. It has been said that when poverty is your inheritance, virtue must be your capital." Hence it was, said Franklin, speaking of the influence of his known integrity of character, that I had so much weight with my fellow citizens. I was but a bad speaker, never eloquent, subject to much hesitation in my choice of words, hardly correct in language, and yet I generally carried my point. When a man's character is gone, all is gone. All peace of mind, all complacency in himself is fled forever. He despises himself. He is despised by his fellow men. Within is shame and remorse. Without, neglect and reproach. He is of necessity a miserable and useless man. He is so, even though he be clothed in purple and fine linen, and fare sumptuously every day. It is better to be poor, it is better to be reduced to beggary, it is better to be cast into prison, or condemned to perpetual slavery, than to be destitute of a good name, or endure the pains and the evils of a conscious worthlessness of character. The time is soon coming when, by the common consent of mankind, it will be esteemed more honorable to have been John Pounds, putting new and beautiful souls into the ragged children of the neighborhood while he mended his father's shoes, than to have sat upon the British throne. The time now is when, if Queen Victoria, in one of her magnificent progresses through her realms, were to meet that more than American queen, Miss Dix, in her circumnavigation of charity among the insane, the former should kneel and kiss the hand of the latter, and the ruler over more than 100 millions of people should pay homage to the angel whom God has sent to the maniac. At your age, said to a youth an old man who had honorably held many positions of trust and responsibility, both position and wealth appear enduring things, but at mine a man sees that nothing lasts but character. Several eminent clergymen were discussing the qualities of self-made men. They each admitted that they belonged to that class, except a certain bishop, who remained silent, and was intensely absorbed in the repast. The host was determined to draw him out, and so, addressing him, said, "All at this table are self-made men, unless the bishop is an exception." The bishop promptly replied, "I am not made yet." And the reply contained a profound truth. So long as life lasts, with its discipline of joy or sorrow, its opportunities for good or evil, so long our characters are being shaped and fixed. Milton said, "He who would write heroic poems must make his whole life an heroic poem." We are responsible for our thoughts, and unless we could command them, mental and moral excellence would be impossible. Charles Kingsley has well said, "Let anyone set his heart to do what is right and nothing else, and it will not be long ere his brow is stamped with all that goes to make up the heroic expression, with noble indignation, noble self-restraint, great hopes, great sorrows, perhaps even with the print of the martyr's crown of thorns." Said James Martineau, "God insists on having a concurrence between our practice and our thoughts. If we proceed to make a contradiction between them, he forthwith begins to abolish it; and if the will not rise to the reason must be degraded to the will." When I say, in conducting your understanding, says Sidney Smith, "Love knowledge with a great love, with a vehement love, with a love coeval with life," what do I say but love innocence, love virtue, love purity of conduct, love that which, if you are rich and great, will vindicate the blind fortune which has made you so, and make them call it justice; love that which, if you are poor, will render your poverty respectable, and make the proudest feel that it is unjust to laugh at the meanness of your fortunes; love that which will comfort you, adorn you, and never quit you, which will open to you the kingdom of thought, and all the boundless regions of conception, as an asylum against the cruelty, the injustice, and the pain that may be your lot in the world; that which will make your motives habitually great and honorable, and light up in an instant 1,000 noble disdains at the very thought of meanness and of fraud. The Arabs express this by a parable that incarnates, as is their wont, the word in the recital. King Nimrod, say they, one day summoned his 3 sons into his presence. He ordered to be set before them 3 urns under seal. One of the urns was of gold, another of amber, and the third of clay. The king bade the eldest of his sons choose among the urns that which appeared to him to contain the treasure of greatest price. The eldest chose the vase of gold, on which was written the word Empire. He opened it and found it full of blood. The second chose the amber vase, whereon was written the word Glory. He opened it and found it contained the ashes of the great men who had made a sensation in the world. The third son took the only remaining vase, the one of clay. He found it quite empty, but on the bottom the potter had written the word God. "Which of these vases weighs the most?" asked the king of the courtiers. The men of ambition replied it was the vase of gold; the poets and conquerors, the amber one; the sages that it was the empty vase, because a single letter of the name of God weighs more than the entire globe. We are of the opinion of the sages. We believe the greatest things are great, but in the proportion of divinity they contain. Although genius always commands admiration, says Smiles, character most secures respect. The former is more the product of brain power, the latter of heart power, and in the long run it is the heart that rules in life. Men of genius stand to society in the relation of its intellect, as men of character of its conscience. and while the former are admired, the latter are followed. Commonplace though it may appear, this doing of one's duty embodies the highest ideal of life and character. There may be nothing heroic about it, but the common lot of men is not heroic, and though the abiding sense of duty upholds man in his highest attitudes, it also equally sustains him in the transaction of the ordinary affairs of everyday existence. The most influential of all the virtues are those which are the most in request for daily use. They wear the best and last the longest. We can always better understand and appreciate a man's real character by the manner in which he conducts himself toward those who are the most nearly related to him, and by his transaction of the seemingly commonplace details of daily duty, than by his public exhibition of himself as an author, an orator, or a statesman. Intellectual culture has no necessary relation to purity or excellence of character. On the contrary, a condition of comparative poverty is compatible with character in its highest form. A man may possess only his industry, his frugality, his integrity, and yet stand high in the rank of true manhood. Character is property. It is the noblest of possessions. It is an estate in the general goodwill and respect of men, and they who invest in it, though they may not become rich in this world's goods, will find their reward in esteem and reputation fairly and honorably won. Without principles, a man is like a ship without rudder or compass, left to drift hither and thither with every wind that blows. What a contrast is afforded by the lives of Bacon and More! Bacon sought office with as much desire as More avoided it. Bacon used as much solicitation to obtain it as More endured to accept it, and each, when in it, was equally true to his character. More was simple, as Bacon was ostentatious. More was as incorruptible as Bacon was venal. More spent his private fortune in office, and Bacon spent the wages of corruption there. Both left office poor in worldly goods, but while More was rich in honor and good deeds, Bacon was poor in everything, poor in the mammon for which he bartered his integrity, poor in the God for which he sacrificed his peace, poor in the presence of the worthless, covered with shame in the midst of the people, trusting his fame to posterity, of which posterity is only able to say that the wisest of men was adviser to the silliest of kings, yet that such a king had a sort of majesty when morally compared with the official director of his conscience. Both More and Bacon served each a great purpose for the world. More illustrated the beauty of holiness. Bacon expounded the infinitude of science. Bacon became the prophet of intellect, More the martyr of conscience. The one pours over our understandings the light of knowledge, but the other inflames our hearts with the love of virtue. All have read of the proud Egyptian king who ordered a colossal staircase built in his new palace, and was chagrined to find that he required a ladder to climb from one step to the next. A king's legs are as short as those of a beggar, so too a prince's ability to enjoy the pleasures of life is no greater than that of a pauper. All that is valuable in this world is to be had for nothing. Genius, beauty, health, piety, love, are not bought and sold. The richest man on earth would vainly offer a fortune to be qualified to write a verse like Milton, or to compose a melody like Mozart. You may summon all the physicians, but they cannot procure for you the sweet, healthful sleep which the tired laborer gets without price. Let no man, then, call himself a proprietor. He owns but the breath as it traverses his lips, and the idea as it flits across his mind. And of that breath he may be deprived by the sting of a bee, and that idea, perhaps, truly belongs to another. We live in deeds, not years; in thoughts, not breaths; in feelings, not in figures on a dial. We should count time by heart throbs. He most lives who thinks most, feels the noblest, acts the best; and he whose heart beats quickest lives the longest. End of chapter 21. Recording by Lucretia B.
Chapter 22 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 22. Moral Sunshine. I have gout, asthma, and 7 other maladies, but am otherwise very well. Sydney Smith. The inborn geniality of some people amounts to genius. Whipple. This one sits shivering in Fortune's smile, taking his joy with bated, doubtful breath. This other, gnawed by hunger all the while, laughs in the teeth of death. T.B. Aldrich. There is no real life, but cheerful life. Addison. Next to the virtue, the fun in this world is what we can least spare. Agnes Strickland. Joy in one's work is the consummate tool. Phillips Brooks. Joy is the mainspring in the whole of endless nature's calm rotation. Joy moves the dazzling wheels that roll in the great timepiece of creation. Schiller. He is as stiff as a poker, said a friend of a man who could never be coaxed or tempted to smile. Stiff as a poker, exclaimed another. Why, he would set an example to a poker. Even Christians are not celebrated for entering into the joy of their Lord. We are told that Pascal would not permit himself to be conscious of the relish of his food. He prohibited all seasonings and spices, however much he might wish for and need them, and he actually died because he forced his diseased stomach to receive at each meal a certain amount of aliment, neither more nor less, whatever might be his appetite at the time, or his utter want of appetite. He wore a girdle armed with iron spikes, which he was accustomed to drive in upon his body, his fleshless ribs, as often as he thought himself in need of such admonition. He was annoyed and offended if any in his hearing might chance to say that they had just seen a beautiful woman. He rebuked a mother who permitted her own children to give her their kisses. Toward a loving sister who devoted herself to his comfort, he assumed an artificial harshness of manner for the express purpose, as he acknowledged, of revolting her sisterly affection. And all this sprung from the simple principle that earthly enjoyment was inconsistent with religion. We should fight against every influence which tends to depress the mind, as we would against a temptation to crime. A depressed mind prevents the free action of the diaphragm and the expansion of the chest. It stops the secretions of the body, interferes with the circulation of the blood in the brain, and deranges the entire functions of the body. Scrofula and consumption often follow protracted depressions of mind. That fateful murmur which is heard in the upper lobes of the lungs in the first stages of consumption often follows depressed spirits after some great misfortune or sorrow. Victims of suicide are almost always in a depressed state from exhausted vitality, loss of nervous energy, dyspepsia, worry, anxiety, trouble, or grief. Mirth is God's medicine, says a wise writer. Everybody ought to bathe in it. Grim care, moroseness, anxiety, all the rust of life ought to be scoured off by the oil of mirth. It is better than emery. Every man ought to rub himself with it. A man without mirth is like a waggon without springs, in which one is caused disagreeably to jolt by every pebble over which it runs. A man with mirth is like a chariot with springs, in which one can ride over the roughest roads and scarcely feel anything but a pleasant rocking motion. I have told you, said Southey, of the Spaniard who always put on spectacles when about to eat cherries, in order that the fruit might look larger and more tempting. In like manner, I make the most of my enjoyments, and though I do not cast my eyes away from my troubles, I pack them in as a small compass as I can for myself, and never let them annoy others. We all know the power of good cheer to magnify everything. Travellers are told by the Icelanders, who live amid the cold and desolation of almost perpetual winter, that Iceland is the best land the sun shines upon. You are on the shady side of 70, I expect, was asked of an old man. No, was the reply. I am on the sunny side, for I am on the side nearest to glory. A cheerful man is preeminently a useful man. He does not cramp his mind, nor take half views of men and things. He knows that there is much misery, but that misery need not be the rule of life. He sees that in every state people may be cheerful. The lambs skip, birds sing and fly joyously, puppies play, kittens are full of joyance, the whole air full of careering and rejoicing insects, that everywhere the good outbalances the bad, and that every evil has its compensating balm. Bishop Fenelon is a delicious man, said Lord Peterborough. I had to run away from him to prevent his making me a Christian. Hume, the historian, never said anything truer than, to be happy, the person must be cheerful and gay, not gloomy and melancholy. A propensity to hope and joy is real riches, one to fear and sorrow, real poverty. Dr. Johnson once remarked with his point and pith that the custom of looking on the bright side of every event was better than having £1,000 a year income. But Hume rated the value in dollars and cents of cheerfulness still higher. He said he would rather have a cheerful disposition, always inclined to look on the bright side of things, than to be a master of an estate with £10,000 a year. We have not fulfilled every duty unless we have fulfilled that of being pleasant. If a word or two will render a man happy, said a Frenchman, he must be a wretch indeed who will not give it. It is like lighting another man's candle with your own, which loses none of its brilliancy by what the other gains. The sensible young man, in theory at least, chooses for his wife one who will be able to keep his house, to be the mother of sturdy children, one who will of all things meet life's experiences with a sweet temper. It is impossible to imagine a pleasant home with a cross wife, mother or sister, as its presiding genius, and it is a rule, with exceptions, that good appetite and sound sleep induce amiability. If, with these advantages, a girl or woman, boy or man, is still snappish or surly, why, it must be due to her or his total depravity. Some things she should not do. She should not dose herself, or study up her case, or plunge suddenly into vigorous exercise. Moderation is a safe rule to begin with, and, indeed, to keep on with. Moderation in study, in work, in exercise, in everything except fresh air, good simple food, and sleep. Few people have too much of these. The average girl at home can find no more sanitary gymnastics than in doing part of the lighter housework. This sort of exercise has object and interest and use, which raises it above mere drill. Add to this a merry romp with younger brothers and sisters, a brisk daily walk, the use of a few moments twice a day of dumbbells in a cool airy room, and it is safe to predict a steady advance towards that ideal state of being in which we forget our bodies and just enjoy ourselves. It is not work that kills men, says Beecher, it is worry. Work is healthy. You can hardly put more on a man than he can bear. But worry is rust upon the blade. It is not movement that destroys machinery, but friction. Helen Hunt says there is one sin which seems to be everywhere, and by everybody is underestimated and quite too much overlooked in valuations of character. It is the sin of fretting. It is as common as air, as speech, so common that unless it rises above its usual monotone, we do not even observe it. Watch any ordinary coming together of people, and we see how many minutes it will be before somebody frets, that is, makes more or less complaint of something or other, which probably every one in the room or car or the street corner knew before, and which most probably nobody can help. Why say anything about it? It is cold, it is hot, it is wet, it is dry. Somebody has broken an appointment, ill cooked a meal, stupidity or bad faith somewhere has resulted in discomfort. There are plenty of things to fret about. It is simply astonishing how much annoyance and discomfort may be found in the course of everyday living, even of the simplest, if one only keeps a sharp eye out on that side of things. Some people seem to be always hunting for deformities, discords, and shadows, instead of beauty, harmony, and light. We are born to trouble as sparks fly upward. But even to the sparks flying upward in the blackest of smoke, there is a blue sky above, and the less time they waste on the road, the sooner they will reach it. Fretting is all time wasted on the road. About two things we should never fret: that which we cannot help, and that which we can help. Better to find one of your own faults than 10 of your neighbours'. It is not the troubles of today, but those of tomorrow and next week and next year, that whiten our heads and wrinkle our faces. Every man we meet looks as if he'd gone out to borrow trouble, with plenty of it on hand, said a French lady driving in New York. The pendulum of a certain clock began to calculate how often it would have to swing backward and forward in the week and the month to come. Then, looking further into the future, it made a calculation for a year, etc. The pendulum got frightened and stopped. Do one day's work at a time. Do not worry about the trouble of tomorrow. Most of the trouble in life is borrowed trouble, which never actually comes. As all healthy action, physical, intellectual, and moral, depends primarily on cheerfulness, says E.P. Whipple, and as every duty, whether it be to follow a plough or to die at the stake, should be done in a cheerful spirit, the exploration of the sources and conditions of this most vigorous, exhilarating, and creative of the virtues may be as useful as the exposition of any topic of science or system of prudential art. Christ, the great teacher, did not shut himself up with monks, away from the temptation of the great world outside. He taught no long-faced, gloomy theology. He taught the gospel of gladness and good cheer. His doctrines are touched with the sunlight and flavoured with the flowers of the fields. The birds of the air and the beasts of the field and happy romping children are in them. True piety is cheerful as the day. Cranmer cheers his brother martyrs, and Latimer walks with a face shining with cheerfulness to the stake, upholds his fellow spirits, and seasons all his sermons with pleasant anecdotes. Nothing will supply the want of sunshine to peaches, said Emerson, and to make knowledge valuable you must have the cheerfulness of wisdom. In answer to the question, how shall we overcome temptation, a noted writer said, cheerfulness is the first thing, cheerfulness is the second, and cheerfulness is the third. A habit of cheerfulness, enabling one to transmute apparent misfortunes into real blessings, is a fortune to a young man or young woman just crossing the threshold of active life. He who has formed a habit of looking at the bright, happy side of things, who sees the glory in the grass, the sunshine in the flowers, sermons in stones, and good in everything, has a great advantage over the chronic dyspeptic, who sees no good in anything. His habitual thought sculptures his face into beauty, and touches his manner with grace. We often forget that the priceless charm which will secure to us all of these desirable gifts is within our reach. It is the charm of a sunny temper, a talisman more potent than station, more precious than gold, more to be desired than fine rubies. It is an aroma whose fragrance fills the air with the odours of paradise. It is from these enthusiastic fellows, says an admirer, that you hear, what they fully believe, bless them, that all countries are beautiful, all dinners grand, all pictures superb, all mountains high, all women beautiful. When such a one has come back from his country trip after a hard year's work, he has always found the cosiest of nooks, the cheapest houses, the best of landladies, the finest views, and the best dinners. But with the other the case is indeed altered. He has always been robbed. He has positively seen nothing. His landlady was a harpy. His bedroom was unhealthy, and the mutton was so tough that he could not get his teeth through it. He goes on to talk of the sun in his glory, says Isaac Walton, the fields, the meadows, the streams which they have seen, the birds which they have heard. He asks, what would the blind and deaf give to see and hear what they have seen? Of Lord Robert's sunshiny face, Rogers said, he always comes to breakfast like a man upon whom some sudden good fortune has fallen. But oh, for the glorious spectacles worn by the good-natured man! Oh, for those wondrous glasses, finer than the Claude Lorraine glass, which throws a sunlit view over everything, and makes the heart glad with little things, and thankful for small mercies. Such glasses had honest Isaac Walton, who, coming in from a fishing expedition on the River Lee, burst out in such grateful little talks as this: let us, as we walk home under the cool shade of this honeysuckle hedge, mention some of the thoughts and joys that have possessed my soul since we two met, and that our present happiness may appear the greater, and we more thankful for it. I beg you to consider with me how many do at this very time lie under the torment of the gout or the toothache, and this we have been free from. And let me tell you that every misery I miss is a new blessing. The hypochondriac who nurses his spleen never looks forward cheerfully, but lounges in his invalid chair and croaks like a raven, foreboding woe. Ah, says he, you will never succeed. These things always fail. The thug of India, whose prayer is a homicide, and whose offering is the body of a victim, is melancholy. The Fijian, waiting to smash the skull of a victim and to prepare a bacola for his gods, is gloomy as fear and death. The melancholy of the Eastern Jews after their black fast, and the ill temper of monks and nuns after their Fridays and Wednesdays, is very observable. It is the recompense which a proud nature takes out of the world for its selfish sacrifice. Melancholia is the black bile which the Greeks presumed overran and pervaded the bodies of such persons, and fasting does undoubtedly produce this. I once talked with a Rosicrucian about the great secret, said Addison. He talked of it as a spirit that lived in an emerald and converted everything that was near it to the highest perfection. It gives lustre to the sun, said he, and water to the diamond. It irradiates every metal, and enriches lead with the property of gold. It brightens smoke into flame, flame into light, and light into glory. A single ray dissipates pain and care from the person on whom it falls. Then I found his great secret was content. My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds and Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy. Shakespeare. Yet with a heart that's ever kind, a gentle spirit gay, you've spring perennial in your mind, and round you make a May. Thackeray. End of chapter 22.
Chapter 23 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 23. Hold up your head. Thoroughly to believe in one's own self, so one's self were thorough, were to do great things. Tennyson. If there be a faith that can remove mountains, it is faith in one's own power. Marie Ebner Eschenbach. Let no one discourage self-reliance. It is, of all the rest, the greatest quality of true manliness. Kossuth. It needs a divine man to exhibit anything divine. Trust thyself. Every breast vibrates to that iron string. Accept the place that divine providence has found for you, the society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. Great men have always done so. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of our own mind. Emerson. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Shakespeare. Yes, said a half-drunken man in a cellar to a parish visitor, a young girl, I am a tough and a drunkard, and am just out of jail, and my wife is starving. But that doesn't give you the right to come into my house without knocking to ask questions. Another zealous girl declared in a reform club in New York City that she always went to visit the poor in her carriage, with the crest on the door and liveried servants. It gives me authority, she said. They listen to my words with more respect. The Fraulein Barbara, who founded the Home for Degraded and Drunken Sailors in London, used other means to gain influence over them. I, too, she would say, taking the poor applicant by the hand when he came to her door, I, too, as well as you, am one of those for whom Christ died. We are brother and sister, and we'll help each other. An English artist, engaged in painting a scene in the London slums, applied to the Board of Guardians of the Poor in Chelsea for leave to sketch into it, as types of want and wretchedness, certain picturesque paupers then in the almshouse. The board refused permission on the ground that, quote, a man does not cease to have self-respect and rights because he is a pauper, and that his misfortunes should not be paraded before the world, unquote. The incident helps to throw light on the vexed problem of the intercourse of the rich with the poor. Kind but thoughtless people, who take up the work of, quote, slumming, unquote, intent upon elevating and reforming the needy classes, are apt to forget that these unfortunates have self-respect and rights and sensitive feelings. But I am not derided, said Diogenes, when someone told him he was derided. Only those are ridiculed who feel the ridicule and are discomposed by it. Dr. Franklin used to say that if a man makes a sheep of himself, the wolves will eat him. Not less true is it that if a man is supposed to be a sheep, wolves will very likely try to eat him. O God, assist our side, prayed the Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, a general in the Prussian service, before going into battle. At least, avoid assisting the enemy, and leave the result to me. If a man possesses the consciousness of what he is, said Schelling, he will soon also learn what he ought to be. Let him have a theoretical respect for himself, and a practical will soon follow. A person under the firm persuasion that he can command resources virtually has them. Humility is the part of wisdom, and is most becoming in men, said Kossuth. But let no one discourage self-reliance. It is, of all the rest, the greatest quality of true manliness. Froude wrote, a tree must be rooted in the soil before it can bear flowers or fruit. A man must learn to stand upright upon his own feet, to respect himself, to be independent of charity or accident. It is on this basis only that any superstructure of intellectual cultivation worth having can possibly be built. "I think he is a most extraordinary man," said John J. Ingalls, speaking of Grover Cleveland. While the Senate was in session to induct Hendricks into office, I had an opportunity to study Cleveland as he sat there like a sphinx. He occupied a seat immediately in front of the vice president's stand, and from where I sat I had an unobstructed view of him. I wanted to fathom, if possible, what manner of a man it was who had defeated us and taken the patronage of the government over to the democracy. We had a new master, so to speak, and a Democrat at that, and I looked him over with a good deal of curiosity. There sat a man, the President of the United States, beginning his rule over the destinies of 60 millions of people, who less than 3 years before was an obscure lawyer, scarcely known outside of Erie County, shut up in a dingy office over a livery stable. He had been mayor of the city of Buffalo at a time when a crisis in its affairs demanded a courageous head and a firm hand, and he supplied them. The little prestige thus gained made him the Democratic nominee for governor, and at a time, his luck still following him, when the Republican party of the state was rent with dissensions. He was elected, and, still more luck, by the unprecedented and unheard of majority of nearly 200,000 votes. 2 years later his party nominated him for president, and he was elected. There sat this man before me, wholly undisturbed by the pageantry of the occasion, calmly waiting to perform his part in the drama, just as an actor awaits his cue to appear on a stage. It was his first visit to Washington. He had never before seen the Capitol, and knew absolutely nothing of the machinery of government. All was a mystery to him, but a stranger not understanding the circumstances would have imagined that the proceedings going on before him were a part of his daily life. The man positively did not move a limb, shut an eye, or twitch a muscle during the entire hour he sat in the Senate chamber. Nor did he betray the faintest evidence of self-consciousness or emotion. And as I thought of the dingy office over the livery stable but 3 years before, he struck me as a remarkable illustration of the possibilities of American citizenship. But the most marvelous exhibition of the man's nerve and of the absolute confidence he has in himself was yet to come. After the proceedings in the Senate chamber, Cleveland was conducted to the east end of the Capitol to take the oath of office and deliver his inaugural address. He wore a close-buttoned Prince Albert coat, and between the buttons he thrust his right hand, while his left he carried behind him. In this position he stood until the applause which greeted him had subsided, when he began his address. I looked for him to produce a manuscript, but he did not, and as he progressed in clear and distinct tones, without hesitation, I was amazed. With 60 millions of people, yes, with the entire civilized world looking on, this man had the courage to deliver an inaugural address making him President of the United States as coolly and as unconcernedly as if he were addressing a ward meeting. It was the most remarkable spectacle this or any other country has ever beheld. Believe in yourself. You may succeed when others do not believe in you, but never when you do not believe in yourself. "Ah, John Hunter's still hard at work," exclaimed a physician on finding the old anatomist at the dissecting table. "Yes, doctor, and you'll find it difficult to meet with another John Hunter when I am gone. Heaven takes 100 years to form a great genius for the regeneration of an empire, and afterward rests 100 years," said Kaunitz, who had administered the affairs of his country with great success for half a century. "This makes me tremble for the Austrian monarchy after my death." "Isn't it beautiful that I can sing so?" asked Jenny Lind naively of a friend. "My lord," said William Pitt in 1757 to the Duke of Devonshire, "I am sure that I can save this country, and that nobody else can." He did save it. What seems to us disagreeable egotism in others is often but a strong expression of confidence in their ability to attain. Great men have usually had great confidence in themselves. Wordsworth felt sure of his place in history and never hesitated to say so. Dante predicted his own fame. Kepler said it did not matter whether his contemporaries read his books or not. I may well wait a century for a reader, since God has waited 6,000 years for an observer like myself. "Fear not," said Julius Caesar to his pilot frightened in a storm. "Thou bearest Caesar and his good fortunes." When the Directory at Paris found that Napoleon had become, in 1 month, the most famous man in Europe, they determined to check his career, and appointed Kellerman his associate in command. Napoleon promptly but respectfully tendered his resignation, saying, "One bad general is better than 2 good ones. War, like government, is mainly decided by tact." This decision immediately brought the Directory to terms. Emperor Francis was extremely anxious to prove the illustrious descent of his prospective son-in-law. Napoleon refused to have the account published, remarking, "I had rather be the descendant of an honest man than of any petty tyrant of Italy. I wish my nobility to commence with myself, and derive all my titles from the French people. I am the Rudolph of Hapsburg of my family. My patent of nobility dates from the Battle of Montenot." When Napoleon was informed that the British government had decreed that he should be recognized only as a general, he said, "They cannot prevent me from being myself." An Englishman asked Napoleon at Elba who was the greatest general of the age, adding, "I think Wellington." To which the Emperor replied, "He has not yet measured himself against me." "Well-matured and well-disciplined talent is always sure of a market," said Washington Irving, "but it must not cower at home and expect to be sought for. There is a good deal of cant, too, about the success of forward and impudent men, while men of retiring worth are passed over with neglect. But it usually happens that those forward men have that valuable quality of promptness and activity, without which worth is a mere inoperative property. A barking dog is often more useful than a sleeping lion. Self-respect is the early form in which greatness appears. "You may deceive all the people some of the time," said Lincoln. "Some of the people all the time, but not all the people all the time. We cannot deceive ourselves any of the time, and the only way to enjoy our own respect is to deserve it. What would you think of a man who would neglect himself and treat his shadow with the greatest respect?" "Self-reliance is a grand element of character," says Michael Reynolds. "It has won Olympic crowns and Isthmian laurels. It confers kinship with men who have vindicated their divine right to be held in the world's memory." End of chapter 23. Recording by David Martin.
Chapter 24 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 24. Books and Success. Ignorance is the curse of God, knowledge the wing wherewith we fly to heaven. Shakespeare. Prefer knowledge to wealth, for the one is transitory, the other perpetual. Socrates. If a man empties his purse into his head, No man can take it away from him. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Franklin. My early and invincible love of reading I would not exchange for the treasures of India. Gibbon. If the crowns of all the kingdoms of the empire were laid down at my feet in exchange for my books and my love of reading, I would spurn them all. Fénelon. Who of us can tell what he had been had Cadmus never taught the art that fixes into form the thought, had Plato never spoken from his cell, or his high harp blind Homer never strung? Bulwer. When friends grow cold, and the converse of intimates languishes into vapid civility and commonplace, these only continue the unaltered countenance of happier days, and cheer us with that true friendship which never deceived hope nor deserted sorrow. Washington Irving. Do you want to know, asks Robert Collier, how I managed to talk to you in this simple Saxon? I read Bunyan, Crusoe, and Goldsmith when I was a boy, morning, noon, and night. All the rest was task work. These were my delight, with the stories in the Bible, and with Shakespeare, when at last the mighty master came within our doors. The rest were as senna to me. These were like a well of pure water, and this is the first step I seem to have taken of my own free will toward the pulpit. I took to these as I took to milk, and, without the least idea of what I was doing, got the taste for simple words into the very fibre of my nature. There was day school for me until I was 8 years old, and then I had to turn in and work 13 hours a day. From the days when we used to spell out Crusoe and old Bunyan, there had grown up in me a devouring hunger to read books. It made small matter what they were, so they were books. Half a volume of an old encyclopedia came along, the first I'd ever seen. How many times I went through that I cannot even guess. I remember that I read some old reports of the Missionary Society with the greatest delight. There were chapters in them about China and Labrador. Yet I think it is in reading as it is in eating. When the first hunger is over, you begin to be a little critical, and will by no means take to garbage if you are of a wholesome nature. And I remember this because it touches this beautiful valley of the Hudson. I could not go home for the Christmas of 1839, and was feeling very sad about it all, for I was only a boy, and sitting by the fire, an old farmer came in and said, "I noticed thou's fond of reading, so I brought thee summat to read." It was Irving's sketch-book. I had never heard of the work. I went at it, and was as them that dream. No such delight had touched me since the old days of Crusoe. I saw the Hudson and the Catskills, took poor Rip at once into my heart, as everybody has, pitied Ichabod while I laughed at him, thought the old Dutch feast a most admirable thing, and long before I was through, all regret at my lost Christmas had gone down with the wind, and I had found out there are books and books. That vast hunger to read never left me. If there was no candle, I poked my head down to the fire, read while I was eating, blowing the bellows, or walking from one place to another. I could read and walk 4 miles an hour. The world centred in books. There was no thought in my head of any good to come out of it. The good lay in the reading. I had no more idea of being a minister than you elder men, who were boys then in this town, had that I should be here tonight to tell this story. Now, give a boy a passion like this for anything, books or business, painting or farming, mechanism or music, and you give him thereby a lever to lift his world, and a patent of nobility, if the thing he does is noble. There were 2 or 3 of my mind about books. We became companions, and gave the roughs a wide berth. The books did their work too about that drink, and fought the devil with a finer fire. In education, says Herbert Spencer, the process of self-development should be encouraged to the fullest extent. Children should be led to make their own investigations, and to draw their own inferences. They should be told as little as possible, and induced to discover as much as possible. Humanity has progressed solely by self-instruction, and that to achieve the best results each mind must progress somewhat after the same fashion is continually proved by the marked success of self-made men. "My books," said Thomas Hood, "kept me from the ring, the dog-pit, the tavern, and the saloon. The associate of Pope and Addison, the mind accustomed to the noble though silent discourse of Shakespeare and Milton, will hardly seek or put up with low or evil company or slaves." "When I get a little money," said Erasmus, "I buy books, and if any is left, I buy food and clothes." "Hundreds of books read once," says Robertson, "have passed as completely from us as if we had never read them; whereas the discipline of mind got by writing down, not copying, an abstract of a book which is worth the trouble, fixes it on the mind for years, and, besides, enables one to read other books with more attention and more profit." "This habit of reading, I make bold to tell you," says Trollope, "is your pass to the greatest, the purest, and the most perfect pleasures that God has prepared for his creatures. Other pleasures may be more ecstatic, but the habit of reading is the only enjoyment I know in which there is no alloy." The Bible was begun in the desert in Arabia ages before Homer sang and flourished in Asia Minor. Millions of books have since gone into oblivion. Empires have risen and fallen. Revolutions have swept over and changed the earth. It has always been subject to criticism and obloquy. Mighty men have sought its overthrow. Works of Greek poets who catered to men's depraved tastes have, in spite of everything, perished. The Bible is a book of religion, and can be tried by no other standard. "Read Plutarch," said Emerson, "and the world is a proud place, peopled with men of positive quality, with heroes and demigods standing around us who will not let us sleep." "There is no business, no avocation whatever," says Wittenbach, "which will not permit a man who has an inclination to give a little time every day to the studies of his youth." "All the sport in the park," said Lady Jane Grey, "is but a shadow of that pleasure I find in Plato." "In the lap of eternity," said Heinsius, "among so many divine souls, I take my seat with so lofty a spirit and such sweet content, that I pity all the great ones and rich men that have not this happiness." "Death itself divides not the wise," says Bulwer. "Thou meetest Plato when thine eyes moisten over the Phaedo. May Homer live with all men forever." "When a man reads," says President Porter, "he should put himself into the most intimate intercourse with his author, so that all his energies of apprehension, judgment, and feeling may be occupied with and aroused by what his author furnishes, whatever it may be. If repetition or review will aid him in this, as it often will, let him not disdain or neglect frequent reviews. If the use of the pen, in brief or full notes, in catchwords or other symbols, will aid him, let him not shrink from the drudgery of the pen and the commonplace book." "Reading is to the mind," says Addison, "what exercise is to the body. As by the one health is preserved, strengthened, and invigorated, by the other virtue, which is the health of the mind, is kept alive, cherished, and confirmed." "There is a world of science necessary in choosing books," said Bulwer. "I have known some people in great sorrow fly to a novel, or the last light book in fashion. One might as well take a rose draught for the plague. Light reading does not do when the heart is really heavy. I am told that Goethe, when he lost his son, took to study a science that was new to him. Ah, Goethe was a physician who knew what he was about. "When I served, when a young man, in India," said a distinguished English soldier and diplomatist, "when it was the turning point in my life, when it was a mere chance whether I should become a mere card-playing, hookah-smoking lounger, I was fortunately quartered for 2 years in the neighborhood of an excellent library, which was made accessible to me." "Books," says E.P. Whipple, "are lighthouses erected in the great sea of time." As a rule, said Benjamin Disraeli, the most successful man in life is the man who has the best information. You get into society in the widest sense, says Geikie, in a great library, with the huge advantage of needing no introductions and not dreading repulses. From that great crowd you can choose what companions you please, for in the silent levees of the immortals there is no pride, but the highest is at the service of the lowest, with a grand humility. You may speak freely with any without a thought of your inferiority, for books are perfectly well bred and hurt no one's feelings by any discriminations. Sir William Waller observed, "In my study I am sure to converse with none but wise men, but abroad it is impossible for me to avoid the society of fools." It is the glorious prerogative of the empire of knowledge, says Webster, that what it gains it never loses. On the contrary, it increases by the multiple of its own power. All its ends become means, all its attainments help to new conquests. At this hour, 500 years since their creation, says De Quincey, the tales of Chaucer, never equaled on this earth for their tenderness and for life of picturesqueness, are read familiarly by many in the charming language of their natal day, and by others in the modernization of Dryden, of Pope and Wordsworth. At this hour, 1,800 years since their creation, the pagan tales of Ovid, never equaled on this earth for the gaiety of their movement and the capricious graces of their narrative, are read by all Christendom. There is no past so long as books shall live, says Lytton. No wonder Cicero said that he would part with all he was worth so he might live and die among his books, says Geikie. No wonder Petrarch was among them to the last and was found dead in their company. It seems natural that Bede should have died dictating, and that Leibnitz should have died with a book in his hand, and Lord Clarendon at his desk. Buckle's last words, "My poor book," tell a passion that forgot death, and it seemed only a fitting farewell when the tears stole down the manly cheeks of Scott as they wheeled him into his library when he had come back to Abbotsford to die. Southey, white-haired, a living shadow, sitting stroking and kissing the books he could no longer open or read, is altogether pathetic. No entertainment is so cheap as reading, says Mary Wortley Montagu, nor any pleasure so lasting. Good books elevate the character, purify the taste, take the attractiveness out of low pleasures, and lift us upon a higher plane of thinking and living. It is not easy to be mean directly after reading a noble and inspiring book. The conversation of a man who reads for improvement or pleasure will be flavored by his reading, but it will not be about his reading. Perhaps no other thing has such power to lift the poor out of his poverty, the wretched out of his misery, to make the burden-bearer forget his burden, the sick his sufferings, the sorrower his grief, the downtrodden his degradation, as books. They are friends to the lonely, companions to the deserted, joy to the joyless, hope to the hopeless, good cheer to the disheartened, a helper to the helpless. They bring light into darkness and sunshine into shadow. 25 years ago, when I was a boy, said Rev. J. A. James, a schoolfellow gave me an infamous book which he lent me for only 15 minutes. At the end of that time it was returned to him, but that book has haunted me like a spectre ever since. I have asked God on my knees to obliterate that book from my mind, but I believe that I shall carry down with me to the grave the spiritual damage I received during those 15 minutes. Did Homer and Plato and Socrates and Virgil ever dream that their words would echo through the ages and aid in shaping men's lives in the 19th century? They were mere infants when on earth, in comparison with the mighty influence and power they now yield. Every life on the American continent has in some degree been influenced by them. Christ, when on earth, never exerted 1/1,000,000th part of the influence he wields today. While he reigns supreme in few human hearts, he touches all more or less, the atheist as well as the saint. On the other hand, Who shall say how many crimes were committed the past year by wicked men buried long ago? Their books, their pictures, their terrible examples live in all they reach and incite to evil deeds. How important, then, is the selection of books which are to become a part of your being. Knowledge cannot be stolen from us. It cannot be bought or sold. We may be poor, and the sheriff may come and sell our furniture, or drive away our cow, or take our pet lamb, and leave us homeless and penniless. But he cannot lay the law's hand upon the jewellery of our minds. Good books and the wild woods are two things with which man can never become too familiar, says George W. Cable. The friendship of trees is a sort of self-love and is very wholesome. All intimate nature is but a mirror, and it is greater far to have the sense of beauty than it is to be only its insensible depository. The books that inspire imagination, whether in truth or fiction, that elevate the thoughts, are the right kind to read. Our emotions are simply the vibrations of our soul. The moment fiction becomes mendacious, it is bad, for it induces us to believe a lie. Fiction, purely as fiction, must be innocent and beautiful, and its beauty must be more than skin deep. Every field of art is a playground, and we are extra pleased when the artist makes that field a gymnasium also. Cotton Mather's Essay to do Good, read by the boy Franklin, influenced the latter's whole life. He advised everybody to read with a pen in hand and to make notes of all they read. James T. Fields visited Jesse Pomeroy, the boy murderer, in jail. Pomeroy told him he had been a great reader of blood and thunder stories, that he'd read 60 dime novels about scalping and other blood performances, and he thought there was no doubt that these books had put the horrible thoughts into his mind which led to his murderous acts. Many a boy has gone to sea and become a rover for life under the influence of Marryat's novels. Abbott's Life of Napoleon, read at the age of 7 years, sent one boy whom I knew to the army before he was 14. Many a man has committed crime from the leavening, multiplying influence of a bad book read when a boy. The chaplain of Newgate Prison in London, in one of his annual reports to the Lord Mayor, referring to many fine-looking lads of respectable parentage in the city prison, said that he discovered that all these boys without exception had been in the habit of reading those cheap periodicals which were published for the alleged amusement of youth of both sexes. There is not a police court or a prison in this country where similar cases could not be found. One can hardly measure the moral ruin that has been caused in this generation by the influence of bad books. In the parlour window of the old mossy vicarage where Coleridge spent his dreamy childhood lay a well-thumbed copy of that volume of Oriental fancy, the Arabian Nights, and he has told us with what mingled desire and apprehension he was wont to look at the precious book, until the morning sunshine had touched and illuminated it, when, seizing it hastily, he would carry it off in triumph to some leafy nook in the vicarage garden, and plunge delightedly into its maze of marvels and enchantments. Beecher said that Ruskin's works taught him the secret of seeing, and that no man could ever again be quite the same man or look at the world in the same way after reading him. Samuel Drew said, "Locke's essay on the understanding awakened me from stupor, and induced me to form a resolution to abandon the grovelling views I had been accustomed to maintain." An English tenor, whose leather gained a great reputation, said he should not have made it so good if he had not read Carlyle. The lives of Washington and Henry Clay, which Lincoln borrowed from neighbors in the wilderness, and devoured by the light of the cabin fire, inspired his life. In his early manhood he read Paine's Age of Reason and Volney's Ruins, which so influenced his mind that he wrote an essay to prove the unreliability of the Bible. These two books nearly unbalanced his moral character, but fortunately the books which fell into his hands in after years corrected this evil influence. The trend of many a life for good or ill, for success or failure, has been determined by a single book. The books which we read early in life are those which influence us most. When Garfield was working for a neighbor he read Sinbad the Sailor and the Pirate's Own Book. These books revealed a new world to him, and his mother with difficulty kept him from going to sea. He was fascinated with the sea life which these books pictured to his young imagination. The Voyages of Captain Cook led William Carey to go on a mission to the heathen. The Imitation of Christ and Taylor's Holy Living and Dying determined the character of John Wesley. Shakespeare and the Bible, said John Sharp, made me Archbishop of York. The Vicar of Wakefield awakened the poetical genius in Goethe. I have been the bosom friend of Leander and Romeo, said Lowell. I seem to go behind Shakespeare and to get my intelligence at first hand. Sometimes in my sorrow a line from Spenser steals in upon my memory as if by some vitality and external volition of its own, like a blast from the distant trump of a knight pricking toward the court of Faery, and I am straightway lifted out of that sadness and shadow into the sunshine of a previous and long agone experience. Who gets more enjoyment out of eating, asks Amos R. Wells, the pampered millionaire whose tongue is the wearied host of myriads of sugary, creamy, spicy guests, or the little daughter of the laborer, trotting about all the morning with helpful steps, who has come a long 2 miles with her father's dinner to eat it with him from a tin pail? And who gets the more pleasure out of reading, the satiated fiction glutton, her brain crammed with disordered fragments of countless scenes of adventure, love, and tragedy, impatient of the same old situations, the familiar characters, the stale plots? She, or the girl who is fired with a love for history, say, who wants to know all about the grand old, queer old Socrates, and then about his friends, and then about the times in which he lived, and then about the way in which they all lived, then about the Socratic legacy to the ages? Why will that girl ever be done with the feast? Can you not see, looking down on her joy with a blessing, the very lord of the banquet, who has ordered all history and ordained that the truth he fashions shall be stranger always than the fiction man contrives? Take the word of a man who has made full trial of both. Solid reading is as much more interesting and attractive than frivolous reading, as solid living is more recreative than frivolous living. I solemnly declare, said Sydney Smith, that but for the love of knowledge I should consider the life of the meanest hedger and ditcher as preferable to that of the greatest and richest man in existence, for the fire of our minds is like the fires which the Persians burn in the mountains. It flames night and day, and is immortal, and not to be quenched. Upon something it must act and feed, upon the pure spirit of knowledge, or upon the foul dregs of polluting passions. Therefore, when I say in conducting your understanding, love knowledge with a great love, with a vehement love, with a love coeval with life, what do I say but love innocence, love virtue, love purity of conduct, love that which, if you are rich and great, will vindicate the blind fortune which has made you so, and make men call it justice. Love that which, if you are poor, will render your poverty respectable, and make the proudest feel it unjust to laugh at the meanness of your fortunes. Love that which will comfort you, adorn you, and never quit you, which will open to you the kingdom of thought, and all the boundless regions of conception, as an asylum against the cruelty, the injustice, and the pain that may be your lot in the world. That which will make your motives habitually great and honorable, and light up in an instant 1,000 noble disdains at the very thought of meanness and of fraud. Do I feel like hearing an eloquent sermon? Spurgeon and Beecher, Whitefield, Hall, Collier, Phillips Brooks, Canon Farrer, Dr. Parker, Talmage are all standing on my bookcase, waiting to give me their greatest efforts at a moment's notice. Do I feel indisposed and need a little recreation? This afternoon I will take a trip across the Atlantic, flying against the wind and over breakers without fear of seasickness on the ocean greyhounds. I will inspect the world-renowned Liverpool docks, take a run up to Hawarden, call on Mr. Gladstone, fly over to London and take a run through the British Museum and see the wonderful collection from all nations. Go through the National Art Gallery, through the Houses of Parliament, visit Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace, call upon Queen Victoria, the Prince of Wales, take a run through the Lake region and call upon the great writers, visit Oxford and Cambridge, Cross the English Channel, stop at Rouen, where Joan of Arc was burned to death by the English. Take a flying trip to Paris, visit the tomb of Napoleon, the Louvre Gallery. Take a peep at one of the greatest pieces of sculpture in existence, the Venus de Milo, which a rich and ignorant person offered to buy if they would give him a fresh one. Take a glance at some of the greatest paintings in existence along the miles of galleries. Take a peep into the Grand Opera House, the grandest in the world, to make room for which 427 buildings were demolished. Promenade through the Champs-Élysées, pass under the triumphal arch of Napoleon, take a run out to Versailles and inspect the famous palace of Louis XIV, upon which he spent perhaps $100 million. Do I desire to hear eloquent speeches? Through my books I can enter the Parliament and listen to the thrilling oratory of Disraeli, of Gladstone, of Bright, of O'Connor. They will admit me to the floor of the Senate, where I can hear the matchless oratory of a Webster, of a Clay, of a Calhoun, of a Sumner, of Everett, of Wilson. They will pass me into the Roman Forum, where I can hear Cicero, or the rostrums of Greece, where I may listen spellbound to the magic oratory of a Demosthenes. No matter how poor I am, says Channing, no matter though the prosperous of my own time will not enter my obscure dwelling, if the sacred writers will enter and take up their abode under my roof, if Milton will cross my threshold to sing to me of paradise, and Shakespeare to open to me the worlds of imagination and the workings of the human heart, and Franklin to enrich me with his practical wisdom, I shall not pine for the want of intellectual companionship, and I may become a cultivated man, though excluded from what is called the best society in the place where I live. With the dead there is no rivalry, says Macaulay. In the dead there is no change. Plato is never sullen. Cervantes is never petulant. Demosthenes never comes unseasonably. Dante never stays too long. No difference of political opinion can alienate Cicero. No heresy can excite the horror of Bossuet. Heed not the idle assertion that literary pursuits will disqualify you for the active business of life, says Alexander H. Everett. Reject it as a mere imagination, inconsistent with principle, unsupported by experience. The habit of reading may become morbid. There is a novel-reading disease. There are people who are almost as much tied to their novels as an intemperate man is tied to his bottle. The more of these novels they read, the weaker their minds become. They remember nothing, they read for the stimulus. Their reasoning powers become weaker and weaker, their memory more treacherous. The mind is ruined for healthy intellectual food. They have no taste for history or biography or anything but cheap, trashy, sensational novels. The passive reception of other men's thoughts is not education. Beware of intellectual dram drinking and intellectual dissipation. It is emasculating. Beware of the book which does not make you determined to go and do something and be something in the world. The great difference between the American graduate and the graduates from the English universities is that the latter have not read many books superficially, but a few books well. The American graduate has a smattering of many books, but has not become master of any. The same is largely true of readers in general. They want to know a little of everything. They want to read all the latest publications, good, bad, and indifferent, if it is only new. As a rule, our people want light reading, something to read that will take up the attention, kill time on the railroad or at home. As a rule, English people read more substantial books, older books, books which have established their right to exist. They are not so eager for recent publications. Joseph Cook advises youth to always make notes of their reading. Mr. Cook uses the margins of his books for his notes, and marks all of his own books very freely, so that every volume in his library becomes a notebook. He advises all young men and young women to keep commonplace books. We cannot too heartily recommend this habit of taking notes. It is a great aid to memory, and it helps wonderfully to locate or to find for future use what we have read. It helps to assimilate and make our own whatever we read. The habit of taking notes of lectures and sermons is an excellent one. One of the greatest aids to education is the habit of writing out an analysis or a skeleton of a book or article after we've read it. also of a sermon or a lecture. This habit has made many a strong, vigorous thinker and writer. In this connection we cannot too strongly recommend the habit of saving clippings from our readings wherever possible of everything which would be likely to assist us in the future. These scrapbooks, indexed, often become of untold advantage, especially if in the line of our work. Much of what we call genius in great men comes from these notebooks and scrapbooks. How many poor boys and girls who thought they had no chance in life have been started upon noble careers by the grand books of Smiles, Todd, Matthews, Munger, Whipple, Geikie, Thayer, and others. You should bring your mind to the reading of a book or to the study of any subject as you take an axe to the grindstone, not for what you get from the stone, but for the sharpening of the axe. While it is true that the facts learned from books are worth more than the dust from the stone, even in much greater ratio is the mind more valuable than the axe. Bacon says, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested." That is, some books are to be read only in parts, others to be read but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. Reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. And therefore, if a man write little, he had need have a great memory; if he confer little, he had need have a present wit; and if he read little, he had need have much cunning to seem to know that he doth not. Histories make men wise, poets witty, the mathematics subtle, natural philosophy deep, morals grave, logic and rhetoric able to contend. End of chapter 24.
Chapter 25 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 25. Riches Without Wings. Walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. Abundance consists not alone in material possession, but in an uncovetous spirit. Selden. Less coin, less care. To know how to dispense with wealth is to possess it. Reynolds. Rich, from the very want of wealth, is heaven's best treasures peace and health. Gray. Money never made a man happy yet. There is nothing in its nature to produce happiness. The more a man has, the more he wants. Instead of filling a vacuum, it makes one. Franklin. There are treasures laid up in the heart, treasures of charity, piety, temperance, and soberness. These treasures a man takes with him beyond death, when he leaves this world. Buddhist Scriptures. It is better to get wisdom than gold, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Better a cheap coffin and a plain funeral after a useful, unselfish life, than a grand mausoleum after a loveless, selfish life. I ought not to allow any man, because he has broad lands, to feel that he is rich in my presence. I ought to make him feel that I can do without his riches, that I cannot be bought, neither by comfort, neither by pride. And although I be utterly penniless, and receiving bread from him, that he is the poor man beside me. Emerson. "I don't want such things," said Epictetus to the rich Roman orator who was making light of his contempt for money wealth. "And besides," said the Stoic, "you are poorer than I am, after all. You have silver vessels, but earthenware reasons, principles, appetites. My mind to me a kingdom is, and it furnishes me with abundant and happy occupation in lieu of your restless idleness. All your possessions seem small to you, mine seem great to me. Your desire is insatiate, mine is satisfied." "Lord, how many things are in the world of which Diogenes hath no need!" exclaimed the Stoic, as he wandered among the miscellaneous articles at a country fair. "One would think," said Boswell, "that the proprietor of all this, Kettlestone, the seat of Lord Scarsfield, must be happy." "Nay, sir," said Johnson, "all this excludes but one evil, poverty." What property has he left behind him? People ask when a man dies. But the angel who receives him asks, "What good deeds hast thou sent before thee?" "What is the best thing to possess?" asked an ancient philosopher of his pupils. One answered, "Nothing is better than a good eye," a figurative expression for a liberal and contented disposition. Another said, "A good companion is the best thing in the world." A third chose a good neighbor, and a fourth a wise friend. But Eleazar said, "A good heart is better than them all." "True," said the master, "thou hast comprehended in 2 words all that the rest have said. For he that hath a good heart will be contented, a good companion, a good neighbor, and will easily see what is fit to be done by him." "My kingdom for a horse," said Richard III. of England, amid the press of Bosworth Field. "My kingdom for a moment," said Queen Elizabeth on her deathbed. And millions of others, when they have felt earth, its riches and power slipping from their grasp, have shown plainly that deep down in their hearts they value such things as naught, when really compared with the blessed light of life, the stars and flowers, the companionship of friends, and far above all else, the opportunity of growth and development here, and the preparation for future life. Queen Caroline Matilda of Denmark wrote on the window of her prison, with her diamond ring, "Oh, keep me innocent, make others great." "These are my jewels," said Cornelia to the Campanian lady who asked to see her gems, and she pointed with pride to her boys returning from school. The reply was worthy the daughter of Scipio Africanus and wife of Tiberius Gracchus. The most valuable production of any country is its crop of men. "I will take away thy treasures," said a tyrant to a philosopher. "Nay, that thou canst not," was the retort. "For, in the first place, I have none that thou knowest of. My treasure is in heaven, and my heart is there." Some people are born happy. No matter what their circumstances are, they are joyous, content, and satisfied with everything. They carry a perpetual holiday in their eye and see joy and beauty everywhere. When we meet them, they impress us as just having met with some good luck, or that they have some good news to tell you. Like the bees that extract honey from every flower, they have a happy alchemy which transmutes even gloom into sunshine. In the sick room they are better than the physician, and more potent than drugs. All doors open to these people. They are welcome everywhere. We make our own worlds, and people them, while memory, the scribe, faithfully registers the account of each as we pass the milestones dotting the way. Are we not, then, responsible for the inhabitants of our little worlds? We should fill them with the true, the beautiful, and the good, since we are endowed with the faculty of creating. Genius, says Whipple, may almost be defined as the faculty of acquiring poverty. It is the men of talent who make money out of the work of the men of genius. Somebody has truly said that the greatest works have brought the least benefit to their authors. They were beyond the reach of appreciation before appreciation came. There is an Eastern legend of a powerful genius who promised a beautiful maiden a gift of rare value if she would pass through a field of corn, and, without pausing, going backward, or wandering hither and thither, select the largest and ripest ear, the value of the gift to be in proportion to the size and perfection of the ear she should choose. She passed through the field, seeing a great many well worth gathering, but always hoping to find a larger and more perfect one, she passed them all by. When, coming to a part of the field where the stalks grew more stunted, she disdained to take one from these, and so came through to the other side without having selected any. A man may make millions and be a failure still. Money-making is not the highest success. The life of a well-known millionaire was not truly successful. He had but one ambition. He coined his very soul into dollars. The almighty dollar was his son, and was mirrored in his heart. He strangled all other emotions, and hushed and stifled all nobler aspirations. He grasped his riches tightly till stricken by the scythe of death, when, in the twinkling of an eye, he was transformed from one of the richest men who ever lived in this world to one of the poorest souls that ever went out of it. Lincoln always yearned for a rounded wholeness of character, and his fellow lawyers called him, "perversely honest." Nothing could induce him to take the wrong side of a case, or to continue on that side after learning that it was unjust or hopeless. After giving considerable time to a case in which he had received from a lady a retainer of $200, he returned the money, saying, "Madam, you have not a peg to hang your case on." "But you have earned that money," said the lady. "No, no," replied Lincoln, "that would not be right. I can't take pay for doing my duty." Agassiz would not lecture at $500 a night, because he had no time to make money. Charles Sumner, when a senator, declined to lecture at any price, saying that his time belonged to Massachusetts and the nation. Spurgeon would not speak for 50 nights in America at $1,000 a night, because he said he could do better. He could stay in London and try to save 50 souls. All honor to the comparative few in every walk of life, who, amid the strong materialistic tendencies of our age, still speak and act earnestly, inspired by the hope of rewards other than gold or popular favor. These are our truly great men and women. They labor in their ordinary vocations with no less zeal because they give time and thought to higher things. King Midas, in the ancient myth, asked that everything he touched might be turned to gold, for then he thought he would be perfectly happy. His request was granted, but when his clothes, his food, his drink, the flowers he plucked, and even his little daughter whom he kissed, were all changed into yellow metal, he begged that the golden touch might be taken from him. He had learned that many other things are intrinsically far more valuable than all the gold that was ever dug from the earth. The beggarly Homer, who strolled God knows when, in the infancy and barbarism of the world, was richer far than Croesus, and added more wealth to the world than the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilts, and Goulds. An Arab who fortunately escaped death after losing his way in the desert without provisions tells of his feelings when he found a bag full of pearls, just as he was about to abandon all hope. "I shall never forget," said he, "the relish and delight that I felt on supposing it to be dried wheat, nor the bitterness and despair I suffered on discovering that the bag contained pearls." It is an interesting fact in this money-getting era that a poor author, or a seedy artist, or a college president with frayed coat sleeves, has more standing in society and has more paragraphs written about him in the papers than many a millionaire. This is due, perhaps, to the malign influence of money-getting, and to the benign effect of purely intellectual pursuits. As a rule, every great success in the money world means the failure and misery of hundreds of antagonists. Every success in the world of intellect and character is an aid and profit to society. Character is a mark cut upon something, and this indelible mark determines the only true value of all people and all their work. Dr. Hunter said, "No man was ever a great man who wanted to be one." Artists cannot help putting themselves and their own characters into their works. The vulgar artist cannot paint a virtuous picture. The gross, the bizarre, the sensitive, the delicate, all come out on the canvas and tell the story of his life. Who would not choose to be a millionaire of deeds, with a Lincoln, a Grant, a Florence Nightingale, a Childs? A millionaire of ideas, with Emerson, with Lowell, with Shakespeare, with Wordsworth. A millionaire of statesmanship, with a Gladstone, a Bright, a Sumner, a Washington. Some men are rich in health, a constant cheerfulness, in a mercurial temperament which floats them over troubles and trials enough to sink a shipload of ordinary men. Others are rich in disposition, family, and friends. There are some men so amiable that everybody loves them, some so cheerful that they carry an atmosphere of jollity about them. Some are rich in integrity and character. "Who is the richest of men?" asked Socrates. "He who is content with the least, for contentment is nature's riches." "Do you know, sir," said a devotee of Mammon to John Bright, "that I am worth 1,000,000 sterling?" "Yes," said the irritated but calm-spirited respondent, "I do, and I know that it is all you are worth." A bankrupt merchant, returning home one night, said to his noble wife, "My dear, I am ruined. Everything we have is in the hands of the sheriff." After a few moments of silence, the wife looked into his face and asked, "Will the sheriff sell you?" "Oh, no." "Will the sheriff sell me?" "Oh, no." "Then do not say we have lost everything. All that is most valuable remains to us: manhood, womanhood, childhood. We have lost but the results of our skill and industry. We can make another fortune if our hearts and hands are left us." "We say a man is 'made,'" said Beecher. "What do we mean? That he has got the control of his lower instincts, so that they are only fuel to his higher feelings, giving force to his nature? That his affectations are like vines, sending out all sides blossoms and clustering fruits? That his tastes are so cultivated that all beautiful things speak to him and bring him their delights? That his understanding is opened, so that he walks through every hall of knowledge and gathers its treasures? That his moral feelings are so developed and quickened That he holds sweet commerce with heaven? Oh no, none of these things. He is cold and dead in heart, and mind, and soul. Only his passions are alive. But he is worth $500,000. And we say a man is ruined. Are his wife and children dead? Oh no. Have they had a quarrel? And are they separated from him? Oh no. Has he lost his reputation through crime? No. Is his reason gone? Oh no, it is as sound as ever. Is he struck through with disease? No. He has lost his property, and he is ruined. The man ruined. When shall we learn that a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of things which he possesseth? How is it possible, asks an ancient philosopher, that a man who has nothing, who is naked, houseless, without a hearth, squalid, without a slave, without a city, can pass a life that flows easily? See, God has sent you a man to show you that it is possible. Look at me, who am without a city, without a house, without possessions, without a slave. I sleep on the ground. I have no wife, no children, no praetorium, but only the earth and heavens, and one poor cloak. And what do I want? Am I not without sorrow? Am I not without fear? Am I not free? When did any of you see me failing in the object of my desire, or even falling into that which I would avoid? Did I ever blame God or man? Did I ever accuse any man? Did any of you ever see me with a sorrowful countenance? You are a plebeian, said a patrician to Cicero. I am a plebeian, replied the great Roman orator. The nobility of my family begins with me. That of yours will end with you. No man deserves to be crowned with honor whose life is a failure. And he who lives only to eat and drink and accumulate money is surely not successful. The world is no better for his living in it. He never wiped a tear from a sad face, never kindled a fire upon a frozen hearth. There is no flesh in his heart. He worships no god but gold. Why should I scramble and struggle to get possession of a little portion of this earth? This is my world now. Why should I envy others its mere legal possession? It belongs to him who can see it, enjoy it. I need not envy the so-called owners of estates in Boston and New York. They are merely taking care of my property and keeping it in excellent condition for me. For a few pennies for railroad fare whenever I wish, I can see and possess the best of it all. It has cost me no effort, it gives me no care. Yet the green grass, the shrubbery, and the statues on the lawns, the finer sculptures and paintings within, are always ready for me whenever I feel a desire to look upon them. I do not wish to carry them home with me, for I could not give them half the care they now receive. Besides, it would take too much of my valuable time, and I should be worrying continually lest they be spoiled or stolen. I have much of the wealth of the world now. It is all prepared for me without any pains on my part. All around me are working hard to get things that will please me, and competing to see who can give them the cheapest. The little I pay for the use of libraries, railroads, galleries, parks, is less than it would cost me to care for the least of all I use. Life and landscape are mine. The stars and flowers, the sea and air, the birds and trees. What more do I want? All the ages have been working for me. All mankind are my servants. I am only required to feed and clothe myself, an easy task in this land of opportunity. There is scarcely an idea more infectious or potent than the love of money. It is a yellow fever, decimating its votaries, and ruining more families in the land than all the plagues or diseases put together. Instances of its malevolent power occur to every reader. Almost every square foot of land of our continent, during the early buccaneer period, some call it the march of civilization, has been ensanguined through the madness for treasure. Read the pages of our historian Prescott, and you will see that the whole anti-Puritan history of America resolves itself into an awful slaughter for gold. Discoveries were only side issues. Speak, history, who are life's victors? Unroll thy long scroll and say, have they won who first reached the goal, heedless of a brother's rights? And has he lost in life's great race, who stopped to raise a fallen child and place him on his feet again, or to give a fainting comrade care, or to guide or assist a feeble woman? Has he lost who halts before the throne when duty calls, or sorrow, or distress? Is there no one to sing the paean of the conquered who fell in the battle of life, of the wounded, the beaten, who died overwhelmed in the strife? Of the low and humble, the weary and broken-hearted, who strove, and who failed in the eyes of men, but who did their duty as God gave them to see it? We have yet no man who has leaned entirely on his character and eaten angels' food, said Emerson, who, trusting to his sentiments, found life made of miracles, who, working for universal aims, found himself fed, he knew not how, clothed, sheltered, and weaponed, he knew not how, and yet it was done by his own hands. At a time when it was considered dangerous to society in Europe for the common people to read books and listen to lectures on any but religious subjects, Charles Knight determined to enlighten the masses by cheap literature. He believed that a paper might be instructive and not be dull, cheap without being wicked. He started the Penny Magazine, which acquired a circulation of 200,000 the first year. Knight projected the Penny Cyclopedia and the Library of Entertaining Knowledge, half hours with the best authors, and other useful works at a low price. His whole adult life was spent in the work of elevating the common people by cheap yet wholesome publications. He died in poverty, but grateful people have erected a noble monument over his ashes. How many rich dwellings there are, crowded with every appointment of luxury, that are only glittering caverns of selfishness and discontent. Better a dinner of herbs where love is, than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. No man can tell whether he is rich or poor by turning to his ledger, says Beecher. It is the heart that makes a man rich. He is rich or poor according to what he is, not according to what he has. If our thoughts are great and noble, no mean surroundings can make us miserable. It is the mind that makes the body rich. However it be, it seems to me, 'tis only noble to be good. Kind hearts are more than coronets, and simple faith than Norman blood. Tennyson. Be noble, and the nobleness that lies in other men, sleeping but never dead, will rise in majesty to meet thine own. Lowell. End of chapter 25. Recording by David Martin. End of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden.